with the Ministry of Culture, Lalit Kala Academy, the North Zone Cultural Center, Sahitya Academy and the Tourism Ministry as part of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. With the festival in full swing, we extend a very warm welcome to all of you today to the talk series by Kalakshetra on the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir. It gives us great pleasure in welcoming the dignitaries and speakers for the morning session. We have with us Shri K. Srinivas Rao, Secretary, Sahitya Academy, and Dr. Bharat Gupta, Trustee and Executive Member, Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and Fellow Sangeet Natak Academy. May I please call the dignitaries onto the dais. Srimati Revati Ramachandran, Director, Kalakshetra Foundation. Dr. Bharat Gupta, Fellow Sangeet Natak Academy. And Shri K. Srinivas Rao, Secretary, Sahitya Academy. We'd now like to call upon the Director, Kalakshetra Foundation, Srimati Revati Ramachandran, to deliver the welcome address. We shall begin with a prayer and then follow with a welcome address. Thank you, dear students. We will now have Srimati Revati Ramachandran, Director of Kalakshetra Foundation, welcome the gathering.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaskaram. Art is an expression of the experience within, and all forms of tradition and culture in India are explicit with art. In India, we find that everything that we do or create has a sanctity. Even when we get up in the morning, we're supposed to think of God at all points of time. We've also seen that by keeping alive the spirit behind the culture and tradition of India, the skill and intellectual capability alone do not demonstrate conserving these art forms or these cultural heritages. It is very important to know that our culture and heritage can be well preserved if we think about it and speak about it constantly. Culture and tradition in India is the expression of the Indian philosophy. It is the expression of the greatness of spirit over matter. It is this spirit that has kept our culture and tradition intact, and in spite of all the hurdles and the crisis that India has gone through. When Rukmani Devi speaks about art, it's a very broad spectrum, but we can refer it to also culture. Every aspect of life is included in the word art, she says. The way we dress, the way we speak, the way we live. It is music, dancing, stagecraft, and it is also life. It's very important for all of us to understand that this talk series, which has been arranged by Kalakshetra Foundation on the Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir, is born out of the element to bring out the philosophy of India. From my understanding, the philosophy of the religious ethos of Kashmir has been that where Kashmir has been a repository of Hinduism and Buddhism from before the Common Era. Kashmir Saivism, which has been talked at length yesterday, was also rooted in both Advaita and Dvaita philosophy. Adi Shankara's presence in Kashmir also signifies the presence of Advaita as a philosophy different from Kashmiri Saivism. That Buddhism and all forms of Kashmiri Saivism have been prevalent goes to highlight the level of intellectual subtleness in the valleys. The Agamas have also had a firm foothold as evident by the agamic assumptions of Abhinavagupta's Poetics and Aesthetics, which is going to be discussed today. So the temples of Kashmir are something that bear a history which have been a forgotten past. So these talk series for the next 2 days will throw light on various aspects, and we are having talk series which will be inaugurated by Sri K. Srinivasa Rao. I welcome the Secretary of the Sahitya Academy, Sri K. Srinivasa Rao, who was so nice to accept, though it was a last moment inclusion, I told him, I had him in mind, but I did not tell him. I told him just 2 days before I printed even in the thing. I thank you so much, sir, and welcome you for this gathering. He is indeed a great source of knowledge, and he is so knowledgeable on all aspects. I've always admired what Sahitya Academy is doing currently. The keynote address will be delivered by Dr. Bharat Gupta. He's here with us. I welcome you, sir. He recently delivered a series of talk for our students at Kalakshetra on the Natya Shastra in December. I'm sure the students are still fresh with the talk done by Dr. Bharat Gupta. We also have the temples of Kashmir and the Hindu past of Kashmir by Sri Giridhar Mamidi. He's here. I welcome him. Then we have Kashmir and Buddhism by Dr. C.K. Ghariali. Then we have the agamic assumptions of Abhinavagupta's Poetics and Aesthetics by Professor Rajneesh Mishra. There will be Lalleshwari, the daughter of Vitasta, by Sri Virendra Kwazi, and Kalhana's Rajatarangni by Sri P.R. Kannan. Those are the talks for today. Tomorrow, we will be having Professor Beena Budki, who will be talking about the culture of Kashmir, Adi Shankara from Kaladi to Kashmir by Dr. J. Jagannathan, Why We Should Safeguard the Kashmir Valley by Sri T.K.V. Rajan, who has also put together the exhibition which is outside on Kashmir, Bharata and a Kashmir by Sri Meg Kalyanasundaram, Kashmir through the eyes of Dr. Nagasamy, which will be presented by Srimati Kala Nagaswamy, a PowerPoint presentation. Also, I welcome all these scholars, and I'm also very happy to have amidst us Dr. Radha Bhaskar and Dr. Rajshri Vasudevan, who have come from, who have come for the sessions to sum up the sessions. And so I extend a very warm welcome, and Dr. Sujata Mohan, she is also going to be here as an observer. So these sessions are very important because they go in to really document or preserve what Kashmir is about. And under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, where we have already seen that Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir, is part of this series, has come under the series of Kashmir as the cultural pride of India. And under that, we are celebrating the best of Kashmir, Kashmir on the Buddhist circuit in India, to socialize the idea of best of Kashmir with the concept of Ek Bharat Shreshth Bharat, where Kashmir and Tamil Nadu have been linked, and to connect the events of each state with the theme of water and sustainability through the River Connect. Yesterday we saw that also in the cuisine connection which went on in the evening, where we connected the Kashmir's Vitasta and also the Kaveri. And so we're having all these talks only to encourage students to understand the concept of the importance of Kashmir, the importance of philosophy, the importance of what actually India is. So I welcome all the students, the scholars, and all the teachers and faculty of Kalakshetra Foundation to this talk series. Thank you so much. Namaskaram.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The Director of Kalakshetra, Srimati Revati Ramachandran, shall now facilitate Sri K. Srinivas Rao, Secretary, Sahitya Academy. Sri K. Srinivas Rao, a thinker, scholar, literary expert, administrator with over 3 decades of experience in several positions of literary management. He has been serving the Sahitya Academy for more than 3 decades and is the Secretary of the Sahitya Academy. We invite Sri K. Srinivas Rao to please deliver the inaugural address.
Namaskar and good morning to all of you. Dear Srimati Revati Ramachandran ji, Director, Kalakshetra Foundation, respected Dr. Bharat Gupta ji, Trustee and Executive Member of Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, Madam Dr. C.K. Garyali ji, participants of this program and friends. I am very glad to be here today with all of you, and I have been asked to deliver inaugural address. I am not sure whether I deserve this honor. I will try my best, share my thoughts on the topic, and will most definitely try to keep it short. Long lectures often have soporific effect than revitalizing effect on the listeners and fellow speakers. Before going any further, I would like to congratulate Srimati Revati Ramachandran ji and her team in Kalakshetra Foundation for organizing Vitasta Kashmiri Festival in Chennai in a wonderful manner. Friends, wonderful thing about the Indian subcontinent is that every region has a cluster of languages, sublime literatures, and lofty philosophies. Much of it remains unwritten, and that is the beauty of the literary heritage and intangible cultural heritage of India. And then there are pockets of regions that are stunningly beautiful, and that beautiful landscape in turn inspired millions of poets into raptures, and the outcome was some of the best exotic and sublime poetries and time defying philosophies that the world has ever seen. Kashmir is one such land, the land that has blessed with breathtakingly beautiful, but it is also mysterious. So, from the ancient times, one can witness amazing flow of poetry, deep philosophies, and mystical utterings flow through every inch of Kashmir from ancient times. Normally, one can find literary creations over a long period in a given region in one or two languages. The ones are either cognate or the one national level language and local language. But Kashmir was the pioneer in illustrating the multilingual and multicultural society that is India. So, these literary and philosophical creations flowed in Sanskrit, Kashmiri, Persian, Urdu, Dogri, and a number of local dialects and tribal languages. I said ancient times, and when one goes little deeper, one can easily find that some of the earliest treatises of India came from Kashmir, and some of the greatest minds ever they lived in Kashmir. And just to give two examples, which we have not even mentioned yesterday also, Patanjali and Dridbala. Through Utpala, Abhinav Gupta, and Anandavardhana, this intellectual fire carried on for centuries, and the impact of this flame can be seen far and wide. When it comes to poetry and aesthetics, especially in the ancient times, Kashmir rules supreme. No wonder then that even greatest philosophers that India ever produced, Sri Adi Shankaracharya and Sri Ramanujacharya, visited Kashmir, that I mentioned yesterday also in my talk. It is not merely literature, poetry, performing arts, and aesthetics that flourished in Kashmir from ancient times. I mentioned mysticism. From about 7 centuries ago, and for several centuries, great bunch of mystical poets emerged from the land of Kashmir: Lal Ded, Nandrishi, Rupa Bhavani, Khwaja Nausheri, Sahab Kaul, Nanddar, and host of others. This flow of intellectual river has been non-stop and continues till date, and some of the remarkable luminaries of 20th century Kashmir, Dinanath Nadim, Amin Kamil, Sarvanand Kaul Premi, Rahman Rahi, who just passed away some 10 days ago, Ghulam Nabi Firak, and others enriched Indian literature through their remarkable creations. Grammars of the languages, rules performing arts, steps for literary canons, major and minor premises of the legal treatises, and much more in vast range of subjects that practically encompasses much of human endeavors were shaped and molded by the distinguished minds from Kashmir. Vitasta is the mother river that has been flowing, nourishing, and sustaining millions of lives. Ever since she emerged with the help of Lord Shiva's trident, she has been nurturing civilizations. Vitasta is the silent witness to the emergence of cradle of civilizations, nourishing everyone irrespective of the movement of civilizations and emergences of civil cultures and subcultures through centuries. Like Mother Vitasta, Kashmiri cultural and literary traditions have been nourishing and enriching other cultural and literary traditions. Later, developments and growth in astronomy, philosophy, poetry, law, etc. were shaped by the Kashmiri cultural and literary traditions. Today, people are not seeing that legacy and impact of Kashmiri culture on rest of the subcontinent, primarily due to developments in the societies. That does not and cannot take away the legacy of intellectual nourishment provided by Kashmiri culture. Ancient treatises on music, logic, grammar, laws, mathematics, astrology, poetry, natya, etc. stemmed out of Kashmir and flowed to other cultures, and those societies picked them and developed further those ideas. When one goes through the history of each and every cultural tradition of the vast land of the subcontinent, one is bound to see the touch or hand of Kashmir in them, however tiny that may be, but it will surely be there. At one point of time, more Persian literature was created in India than in Persia. Kashmir played a significant role, and a number of Indian masterpieces were translated and carried Central Asia. One person who came later but ensured continuity was Pandit Tabaram Turki, and we all should be remembered Betab with gratitude. Betab is also his pen name. Today, we have a large number of writers who are of Kashmiri origin, and they write in Urdu, Hindi, and English, and have received acclaim. It is not only in the field of humanities, but in the fields such as science and medicine. Also, Kashmir intellectuals have ascertained their presence. This program is being organized in Chennai under Honorable Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi ji's vision, Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, as our director madam has already mentioned. Tamil and Kashmiri are paired languages. For us, it is languages. For others, it is states. In yesterday's seminar, I mentioned about the deep-rooted cultural connections between the lands of Kashmir and Tamil Nadu, and related aspects were mentioned by other speakers too. Today, the world is at crossroads, not only from the threats posed by the climate crisis, but also crisis of eroding cultural foundations. It is time for all of us to redirect ourselves to our cultural roots and rediscover the meaning of cultures. When we do that, we will all see the deep-rooted connectivity among all the diverse traditions of India. So, organizing Vitasta Kashmir Festival in Tamil Nadu is not without significance and meaning, as the contemporary people may rush to assume these are all meaningless. Festivals like Vitasta Kashmir Festival will go a long way in rediscovering our past and try to emulate intellectual peaks attained by luminaries from the bygone eras. With these few words, I conclude my speech, and I thank once again Kalakshetra Foundation, particularly its director, Srimati Revati Ramachandran, for providing this opportunity to me. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. We shall now have the Director of Kalakshetra Foundation, Srimati Revati Ramachandran, felicitate Dr. Bharat Gupta, Trustee and Executive Member, Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts. A well-known figure in the field of arts and Hindu studies, Professor Bharat Gupta is a classicist, theatre theorist, Surbahar player and musicologist, all bundled into one. A retired professor from the University of Delhi, Dr. Bharat Gupta is currently the trustee and executive member at Indira Gandhi National Center of Arts and is a fellow at the Sangeet Natak Academy, New Delhi. We please invite Dr. Bharat Gupta to deliver the keynote address.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Madam, sir, all my dear friends here, scholars, students, it is always a blessing to come to a Vidya Tirtha like Kalakshetra. And the blessing becomes more intense when the occasion, as part of the Bharat Amrit Mahotsav, is dedicated to Vitasta. Rivers are mothers of civilization. There have been no great civilizations without great rivers. So, there is destiny in the very fact that wherever the Almighty has provided us rivers, there would be culture and civilization. I have just a few things to say today, as time is very limited, and I am myself anxious to hear the scholars present here like Professor Rajneesh and several others. So, I would request you to show a painting a picture of a painting of Acharya Abhinav Gupta, which was painted by a painter of Hyderabad. I say Hyderabad because it's now both Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Sesagiri Rao. It was done sometimes in late 80s. Now, he is the painter, the modern painter. But who is the one who made the pen portrait? It is a pen portrait or a stotra in praise of Abhinav Gupta, written by a Tamilian, Madhuraj Yogi. Madhuraj Yogi traveled from, I think, Madurai, all the way to become a disciple of Abhinav Gupta. It is through this painting, through this pen portrait, this stotra, Draksharamasya Madhye, I'll just read a few verses, that we see the glory, the potency, and the supreme knowledge of Acharya Abhinav. And it gives the total personality and the total contribution of the Acharya in just a few verses and just in a single painting. I'll just briefly, very briefly, before I come to my main paper, go through some of the lines. Draksha Ramasya Madhye Spatika Manimaye Mandape Chitra Ramye Pushpasragadhupadeepairavahala parimale charchitai chandanadyai Vadyairgitai sanrityai Satat Mukhrite Yogini Siddha Sanghai Akirne Swarnapithe Mridutalimate Baddhamukta Vitali. So here he is sitting in this garden of grapes, and the next verse goes on to describe that how Kshemaraj and various other disciples are writing what he is speaking. So, in ancient times, the gurus would simply speak out and their disciples would memorize, and later on, or at the same time, they would write out on a palm leaf or bhurja patra whatever was being said. And in the case of Abhinav, as there is such a great volume of almost 42 or 43 works with this huge commentaries like Abhinav Bharati, so it was being written. And he says, Asinah Kshemaraja Prabhritibhirakhilaya Sevitah Shishya Vargai. He describes this. And then, what is he like? Anandandolitakshaha Sphutakrita tilako bhasmana bhalamadhye Rudraksho ullasita karanaha Kalita kachabharo Malavah kurchaha Raktango yakshapanko lasitagalo lamba mukto pivitaha Kshaumam vaso vasanaha Shashikara dhavala Veera yogasanasthaha. You see, when I was putting my mind and trying to inspire the artist, then I submitted to him that most of the pen portraits which have been painted earlier always showed him as an old, declining sadhu. But you see here, he is Veer Asanasthaha. He is literally in Veer Asana. And he is playing Janva Saktaika Hasta Sphuta Paramashiva Jnana Mudraksha Sutro Vamashri Pani Padma Spurita Nakha Mukhair Vadayan Nada Veena. He is playing the Nada Veena. These are the Veenas which were prevalent till 12th century. The present Veenas prevalent all over India, they came into existence more than 100 years after Abhinav Gupta. So he's playing the Nada Veena, which is just giving the sound, and that is Dhanurakara, like the ancient Chitra and various other Veenas. Now the most important line, Shri Kanteshavataraha Paramakarunaya Prapta Kashmira Deshaha Shriman Naha Patu Sakshat Abhinav Vapusha Dakshina Murti Deva. So he is nobody else except Dakshina Murti Deva, Shiva himself. Sakshat, he has incarnated. Each line of this verse has a philosophical dimension. He is Sakshat, Avatarita. So there is Avatar. Avatar of whom? Shiva. Avatar of Dakshinamurti. So here is a man from Tamil Nadu seeing Dakshinamurti in Abhinav Gupta. I am not saying this because of any present day concern, however noble they may be. I am just reading out a verse which was written by a great scholar, Madhuraj Yogin, who became disciple. And he became a disciple because he knew that the Kanteshavatara is in Kashmir. In brief, Abhinav Gupta was recognized by all the Shaivas of India as Kanteshavatara, as Dakshinamurti Sakshat, incarnated in Kashmir. So, this very pen portrait represents what people from one end of the country could see in a genius in another end of the country. And how things could travel from north to south, south to north, east to west, and west to east. The texts themselves tell the story. So when we do the Vyakhya of the text, then we should become aware of what is our responsibility. And now to my paper. Yastanmayad hriday samvadana kramena drakchitra shakti gana bhumi vibhag bhagi harshollasat parvikar jushah karoti vande tamam tamamindu kalavatam sam. I'm going to, as time is short, I'm going to first give you a very brief summary of what I intend to say. Abhinav Gupta is not only a traditional interpreter of classical texts. He is an example par excellence of the great interpreter who reconciled the conflicting strands of thought prevalent in his age to create a unified vision based on metaphysical, epistemological, and aesthetic principles. So whatever aspect of knowledge, in whatever kind of diversity existed in his times, he brought it together. This is one of the great acts of our unifiers. There is the tendency of the Vyas, the one who expands the local, who expands the regional, who expands the new, who expands the immediate. And then there is the great ability of the one who performs the opposite of what the Vyas does, that is Samas, brings together. So Abhinav Gupta is par excellence an Acharya who demonstrates us the meaning of what is bringing together. And that is very important in modern times. Why? We need to eliminate the present cacophony on the Indian literary and philosophic scene caused by conflicting values of traditional poetics and darshanas with the invading theories of the West. There is a cacophony today. We have our tradition, we have our theories, we have our siddhantas, Advaita, Rasa, this and that, and all. And then in strange contrast to that, causing us to become almost schizophrenic people. Another side which is pulling us all the time, gnawing at us all the time. And what is that? Theories of the West, such as critical theory, moral relativism. You know, one man's meat is another man's poison. हो गया बस. आपको जो अच्छा लगता है आप करिए, जो हमें अच्छा लगता है हम करेंगे. No other common ground. And the new intellectual terrorism, which is known by the name wokeism. cancel culture, which is now considered to be the latest thing and which has entered Indian universities and is not only disturbing our campuses, but it has gone very deep into our perception, how we see things, how we define art, how we define our life. So, it is often thought that the job of a Vyakhyaकार is to provide a mere gloss or a scholia on some older revered text. That a Vyakhyaकार like Abhinav Gupta, not only of course he wrote great unifying works like Tantra Lok, where all the tantras were united into one, put together into one great epitome. Not only he did that, he wrote so many Vyakhyas also. It is to present a worldview. The job of the Vyakhyakar is not just to make comments or write a scholia or a tika, but it is to present a worldview, a set of values that illuminate every aspect of life, and most of all, its moral aims. Moral aims, or as they were once called, the Purusharthas. So unless the Vyakhyaकार is able to address the Purusharthas, the Vyakhya will have no meaning. The Vyakhya will have no grounds to stand upon. You know, we have become very shy of these words now, under intimidation of, most of Western academia. And I have had the great fortune of going to a modern school and a modern missionary college of eminence, and then to foreign university for my education. And I have seen the whole hollowness of this philosophy, which is never able to reconcile things on moral grounds itself. And that is exactly the problem which Abhinav Gupta addressed even at his time. Because very soon Kashmir was destined to go under very strange changes. And as scholars know, Kshemaraj wrote about the great moral degradation that happened very soon. So, this whole contradiction of what are the high values and how they have been conceived, perceived, and reconciled, and what is the conduct of the people has always been there. The aim of the Vyakhyaकार is to reconcile the contradictions. And that is exactly what Abhinav Gupta did in a most extensive manner in his times. I'll take just another 5 minutes to conclude. This paper I'll send later to you, Mrs. Ramchandran, and then you can publish it. Now, I had wanted to explain, I don't have time now, how was a Vyakhya done in traditional manner by Abhinav Gupta, where he shows how Vyakhya is to be done, Upadeyasya Sampada, etc., etc. But I will very briefly summarize some of the great contributions of Abhinav Gupta and how he did this reconciling, how he brought things together. You see, in writing Abhinav Bharati, because Abhinav Bharati is not only a voluminous Vyakhya, But by virtue of its being on the Natya Shastra, which covers almost everything under the sun, because a work of drama will take up all kinds of things. All the shilpas, all the arts, all the things are there always in theater. So there is a comment on that. So the first thing Abhinav Gupta addresses on Natya Shastra is that it may have been a contribution of many people, but the work as it stands today is a recension created by a single mind. See, this is the first thing that he establishes. He doesn't deny that there are all kinds of things which have been added to it over a period of time, and he himself ends up adding something which does not exist in Natya Shastra, namely the Shantaras. So he becomes actually the progenitor of a line of thought which does not belong to Natya Shastra but adds to Natya Shastra. Because according to Natya there can be no Shantaras, but still Abhinav establishes, and then Madhur and various other rasas follow. He also recognizes the contribution of various other commentators like Kohal, Shandilya, etc. But the most important thing he says is that Natya is a rasa itself. And in this, he covers the whole discussion whether literature is something different from drama. You see, we are caught up in these problems in modern times under Western classifications. And sometimes people were, of course, at that time also discussing, when they were discussing various kinds of dhwani. But he makes it very clear that Natya itself is rasa. And then his great contribution that rasa is not born or created by the poet or the actor, but is eternally present as part of creation. I don't have the time to read out his quotations where he says this. And he says that there is a special pleasure in watching drama as an audience, not just as a single reader. And that is something which is the whole crux of his philosophy. You see, how he creates Abhivanjanavad, why does he create Abhivanjanavad, is very important. For Abhinav, Sadharanikaran meant that the whole community is offering the same experience of Vibhav and Anubhav and Vyabhichari Bhav. And Sadharanikaran is for all spectators together. It's an important point. I don't experience it just by reading a text sitting at home as we are, reading a text today and thinking it is drama or a piece of literature. He says that there is this realization of a single unified experience for all spectators. So it is community watching. He is one of the earliest persons to point that. And he says it very clearly, Ataeva sarva samajikanam ek ghanataya eva pratipatti sutaram rasa pariposhaya. That for emergence of rasa, pariposha of rasa, sutaram ek ghanataya eva pratipatti, that they are all together in it. So watching together takes us to a level of experience which just seeing by something by myself or reading something by myself does not happen. There are some various other subtle points as to how he really created his most important contribution. And that is that what you really enjoy is not what you see, but you enjoy something which is already there in you, which is anadi vasana. And theater is only a method of removing the curtain from that anadi vasana. Only that it does it through a special agency of eka ghanataya pratipatti, one, and second, tatra vighna apsarakaha vibhava adi prabhatyaya. That theater is really taking you inside into your anadi vasana, and this anadi vasana is nothing else than Shiva himself. So this bringing the experience of rasa to an identification of rasa with experience of the ultimate, the supreme, Shiva. This is his very clear-cut contribution. Now, technically, this goes a little beyond the aim of Natya. And what it starts in the whole history of Indian aesthetics is a turning away from the agency of this experience, Natya, to the form of your Ishta. So in the case of Abhinav, Ishta is Shiva, and Natya becomes nothing else than a darshan of Shiva, of course through the Anadi Vasana. Then the whole thing is followed. You replace Shiva by Krishna, you replace Shiva by Devi, you replace Shiva by any other kind of sadhana. And so the experience of theater then turns more and more towards what is called some kind of a bhakti or a sadhana, or the purpose there is different. So from Natya, we turn entirely into pursuit of bhakti. Natya in itself is no longer the aim. And art is no longer what was earlier called Brahmananda Sahodara. Not Brahmanand, but Brahmananda Sahodar. But from Brahmananda Sahodar, the doctrine of Nayak, we with Abhinav arrive at experience of rasa as Brahmanand itself, as seen through my Ishta. Now there are many other things which Abhinav Gupta did. I do not have time for that. I'll just conclude by saying a couple of things very briefly. How do we make use of this immense knowledge of Abhinav today? How are we able to use it? The first thing is obviously to understand what are the values and principles of our tradition. You see, this is a time when we have to decide what do we live for. Are we living for ethnic diversity? Is ethnic diversity and equality defined in terms of ethnic diversity a purpose of life? Because that's the value which is being told us as the ultimate value today. And as a matter of fact, this is the latest beating stick of the West, critical race theory. So they have devised a whole thing by saying that you are people who believe in hierarchy and inequality of man, inequality of human beings, inequality of gender, inequality of all kinds, and hence you have to come to a kind of equality which creates nothing else than uniformity by destroying the diversity. We have to take up this challenge straight. What was the need for Abhinav Gupta to write that huge thing, I think in how many chapters? 34 chapters, Tantra Lok. Huge. Where every kind of tantric upasana is brought in from Malini, Tantra and all these, and reconciled within one great system, that nothing is excluded, that it is part of it. Vammarg is also part of it, but you have to understand it, and you have to use it, because there were gurus who could really practice it, guide it. But in principle, it was not thrown out. So, inclusiveness had been practiced, but inclusiveness can only be practiced if you believe in a fundamental unity of being. You see, in 1930s, there were quite a few people in the West, like Aldous Huxley, who were deeply influenced by Indian thought, Buddhist, Shaiva, etc., and who started talking about something called perennial philosophy. Huxley had written a whole book, Perennial Philosophy. And there was resistance to that, because they said that people from different parts of the world have perceived the same thing. And Christian mystics are perhaps perceiving the same things which Hindu mystics or some others are. So the trend was to see some kind of a unity, to presume that some kind of unity exists. You can reconcile when you believe that there is one. But if you believe that there can be no one, that one perception is true, the other perception is false, then you cannot reconcile. I'll give you a simpler example. How to use diversity. And this is the last point that I'm making, and I'll take only a minute. You know, I need not point this out to the audience here, that there are many notes, many swaras, right? But a swara by itself is not enjoyable. Nobody can enjoy a sa or a ma or a consonance between sa and ma, because that is not music. What is needed is a relationship between swara. And that relationship, in order to become ranjaka or something which entertains, has to become a raga. So when certain number of swaras come together in a relationship, in a unity, in a structure, then there is diversity, then there is individualism, then there is something specific, but all that is serving to create a single raga. I've given you a very practical example. If you don't believe that there can be or that there is a single raga, then there can be no unity. So the ancient Greeks believed in harmonia, harmony, where different things are coming together in a relationship, where the concentration is on relationship. Even 400, 500 years ago in Western music, they thought of symphony. Many kinds of sounds, phony, in a symphony, coming together. So it is a relationship. Unless you believe in that relationship, unless you posit that relationship, what is the use of diversity? Diversity has no meaning. The present crisis, the present civilizational crisis of conflict, of contradiction, of small-mindedness can only be solved if we have a wider vision of how to come together and create a harmony. And for that we have to come to models, to Purvacharyas like Srimad Abhinav Gupta. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for those thoughtful and knowledgeable insights, Dr. Bharat Gupta, Sri Srinivas Garu, and Madam Director. Thank you so much for those lovely insights. On that very insightful note, we open the first session of the Vitasta Talk series. The maiden series for today will be helmed by Shri Giridhar Mamidi. I request Dr. Giridhar Mamidi to please adorn the dais. He will be felicitated by the Director of Kalakshetra Foundation, Srimati Revati Ramachandran. Dr. Giridhar Mamidi, ladies and gentlemen. Shri Giridhar Mamidi, a chartered accountant by profession, he has served as CFO for mammoth organizations. A very, very ardent preserver of our culture and heritage, Shri Mamidi has stored more than 70 sites associated with the Mahabharata and Vedic period, including the Harappan sites in Bharata. He has toured the interiors of Kashmir extensively, including the militancy-affected places, to rediscover its forgotten and abandoned Hindu past, which he will elaborate to us now in his talk, Temples of Kashmir and Hindu Past of Kashmir. Over to you, Dr. Giridhar Mamidi.
Sri Mahaganaadhipataye Namaha, Sri Gurubhyo Namaha, Hari Om, Sabhaye Namaha. Namaste to all of you. Friends, we were just, bathed in Abhinav Gupta's knowledge by Gupta ji, and, it's still to be assimilated, it's still to seep in. Such wonderful talk that he gave is something which I really congratulate you, sir, and I really appreciate the kind of knowledge that you have shared with all of us. I'm sure the next generation would be deeply benefited with what you said. Thank you, sir. At the outset, I would like to, is this working?
Yeah? Yeah, okay. At the outset, let me thank Madam Revati ji and her team for conceiving and planning and conducting such a wonderful program here on Vitasta. You know, even Thiruvalluvar had spoken about the Bharat, which extends from the Himalayas to the Sagara, the sea. So we are all part of the same cultural, continuum. So in that sense, I think it is wonderful that Kalakshetra has organized, to bring Kashmir to people in South who probably don't have access to understand this as much. Especially after Bharat Gupta ji spoke, I'm not going to tax you with too much of intellect because I am going to talk to you like a yatri. A lot of tourists do go to Kashmir, but I'm going to walk you through as a yatri to understand the Hindu canvas of Kashmir. This is not to get into some kind of issue with regard to what happened, temple burning, temple destruction. I'm not getting into it. But I'm going to focus on the temples as they exist today. So I'm sure all of you know the kind of temples you have in Tamil Nadu, probably in places like Himachal or Uttarakhand. Can any of you recite three names? Can any of you tell me three names of any kshetras in Kashmir other than Amarnath and Shankaracharya Hill? By the way, this is not for the Kashmiri Pandits. Martand, fine. What else? Kheer Bhavani. See, we are struggling. But you ask the same question about Uttarakhand. You're going to reel out Haridwar, Rishikesh, Kedar, Badri, whatnot. Why do we not know about Kashmir?
Hanuman Temple.
Fine, wonderful, okay. So fine, friends, I'm going to walk you through the Hindu alayas and temples of Kashmir. So just sit back and relax and watch Kashmir unfold in front of your eyes. So as we all know, the Kashmir Valley was filled with a lake called Satisar. And you can see the map. It's one part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The valley is just one part. And so the Satisar had a lake in that. Once the lake drained out with the grace of Rishi Kashyapa, the land emerged out of it, and that's how the people started living there, and that's how people started, occupying these lands. And it is because of Rishi Kashyap, the name of the state has come as Kashmira. So if you look at the satellite images, you can see the valley here surrounded by huge, massive mountains. There is Pir Panjal mountain here, and there is Kashmir range of mountain here. You can see the entire range of mountains here. So in a schematic map, you can see ranges of mountains here. In Kashmir itself, you have the Pir Panjal, you have the Great Himalayan range, Zanskar, Ladakh and Karakoram range. So you have series of mountain ranges. Between these mountain ranges, you find valleys. In fact, Kashmir is not a single valley. You can say it consists of 4 valleys. First is the Kashmir Valley. Second is the Lolab Valley. Third is the Karen sector, which is abutting the POJK now, where Sharda Peeth is there. And the fourth one is the Gurez Valley. Gurez and the Kashmir Valley are the larger ones. Lolab is slightly smaller. So if you see ancient, a map of Bharat, you would see the old names of all these rivers. Can you see the, yeah. See, the Shatadru, this is Sutlej. Vipasa, that is Bias. Airavati, Ravi. Askini, Chenab. Vitasta, Jhelum. And of course, Sindhu River. And you can see the ancient Saraswati River as well in the ancient maps. So these are the rivers that flow through Kashmir. And if you see, we all know about Ganga Avatarana, that the Ma Ganga descended onto earth through the locks of Bhagavan Shiva. If you see the, Shiva Tandava Stotra, there is one Pallavi in that, Jata Bhujanga Pingala Sphurat Fana Mani Prabha. I'm sure some of you who know, Shiva Tandava Stotra would have heard this, right? Jata Bhujanga Pingala Sphurat Fana Mani Prabha. So that means in Jata Juta of Bhagavan Shiva, between the locks, the Fani. Fani is nags, serpents. Serpents are dancing. This is the description in that. So you have seen the range of mountains. Each range of mountain is one lock of Bhagavan Shiva. So you see, between the locks of Shiva, you see the nags. That is why in Kashmir, each of these are called nags. You have Anant Nag, you have Kokar Nag, you have Veri Nag. So there are nags. Nag is a spring. A Vuta we call it in Telugu. That means it's a natural spring, water which originates and goes between the locks, between the range of mountains. So it is just nothing but, you see, a sadhu still holds the locks even today as well. So this is nothing but, if you see this image here, you have Kailash range here. You see, all the rivers in Bharatavarsha originate from Kailash, literally. Be it Brahmaputra, be it Sindhu, be it, the other rivers of Indus, or Ganga, Yamuna, Gandaki, everything. So it is like rivers flowing from the mats of Bhagavan Shiva. That is what that, Pallavi describes. Jata Bhujanga Pingala Sphurat Fana Mani Prabha. So Kashmir is nothing but valleys formed within the locks of Bhagavan Shiva. That's how we have to conceive it. So every inch of that land is holy. Every inch of that particular land is divine. So it could be Bhagavan Shiva, Shakti, or whatever. Let's start with a few maps before we go into the actual temples. We all know the general map of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. What we don't know is there was a principality by name Chitral. Chitral was a subordinate kingdom to Raja Hari Singh. So Raja Hari Singh had a suzerainty over Chitral. Ultimately, when he handed over the state of Jammu Kashmir to Bharat, Chitral also should have come to us. But with the wisdom of the rulers on those days, we somehow never bothered to take it back. I'm actually wearing a Chitrali topi. So this is our cultural continuum. So in Chitral area, you have a tribe called Kalash tribe, which almost dates to Rigvedic time. So it still exists. Their ancient traditions they are still following. So unfortunately, we don't even have a knowledge of its connection to Kashmir and rest of Bharat. This, of course, we are all aware. This is the map of the state that we have taken in our constitution. And this is the current state where we hold about 60% of the land, 30% is with Pakistan, and about 10% is with China. So just to get a feel of how the map looks like. Post the amendment dilution of Article 370, by the way, Article 370 still exists. After its application to Kashmir has been removed, the government of India released a map which showed Gilgit-Baltistan as part of Ladakh and PO, JK and Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory as separate one. So, of course, I'm not going to get into details of this. Bharat Gupta ji spoke so much about Abhinav Gupta. We know what all he wrote. Tantra Loka, Tantra Sara, Eshwara Pratya Vijnana Vimarshini, Abhinava Bharati, Bhairavastave, Bodhaka Panchadashika. So many things he has written. We have Panini, we have Utpaladeva, Lalleshwari, and so many great, great rishis who enriched this whole Bharatiya Sanatana Dharma in Kashmir. Their unique culture, again, dates back to thousands of years. You can see women wearing rings, they dig a hole in the middle of the ear. Kashmiri, Hindu women. It's not like what we do it at the end of it. They do it in the middle of the ear. So it's a different kind of a thing. And you see the Havan. Even now their practices are completely based on ancient Vedic rituals. they give higher prominence to Agnihotra, Yagnas, rather than to Vigraharadhana. Of course, there are temples, there are murtis, but the first priority, the biggest obligation for them are Havans. Of course, the great Sharda Lipi, which we are reviving, the government is now trying to revive. This is very unique to the Kashmiri culture. Now, let's go back to the main topic of today. How well do we know about the temples beyond Amarnath Ji? We found the answer. We hardly know anything about it. So what I would do is, I would make my presentation in 3 parts. One is the temples of Srinagar, second would be from South Kashmir, and the third would be from North Kashmir. Oh my, I was only worried about it. Sure. Sure. So I just presented a snapshot of Google Earth map. So you can see the entire valley is littered with thousands and thousands of temples. I have just named a few of them here. Let's go to Srinagar. Srinagar itself has so many of them. Of course, we all know about Shankaracharya Hill. Whoever has gone to Srinagar must have definitely gone to Shankaracharya Hill. But then, how many of you have gone to Pandritan Mandir? Pandritan Mandir is within the most heavily guarded cantonment of our country, Badami Bagh cantonment. They call it BB Cant. This cantonment is the most heavily guarded. Parinda bhi nahi ud sakta hai. Hindi, there is a statement. Even a bird flies there, it is checked. It is that strictly monitored. Inside the precincts of this cantonment is this Pandritan Mandir. This, the Kashmiri Pandits dated back to the Pandava era. They say that Pandavas established this mandir. You can see that it is in the middle of a spring. Natural spring, water comes out, and then there is a mandir. Of course, the ancient idol has been broken, and the new one has been put up by the Indian Army. And there is a floating bridge. You can remove the bridge. The greatness of this mandir, in addition to its historicity, is that there's a memorial just behind this, inaugurated by Modi ji a few years back. You can see here Pandritan Mandir, you can see Pandritan Mandir here, and you can see Pandritan, in all these 3. Here you can see Pandritan Mandir. All 3 of them you can see Pandritan Mandir. The greatness of this memorial is, every single soldier who sacrificed for the cause of Bharat since 1947 till date, all their names are etched in gold on all these granite stones there. This in itself is a very emotive thing. What shook me to the core, and even now when I talk, my throat chokes, is there are about 3 or 4 blank granite stones with no names mentioned on that. As a nation, we are telling the world, we are telling everybody that we are willing to lose hundreds of our boys, but we will not give up Kashmir. As I said, it's heavily guarded, but you should all seek permission and go see this memorial and then experience this. Then let's get back to the other temples. Mata Chakreshwari Mata Mandir. A lot of people see this mandir and come back and tell us that Chakreshwari Mata Mandir is actually Sharda Peeth. It's not Sharda Peeth. A lot of people say we've seen Sharda Peeth. Sorry. Chakreshwari Mata Mandir is a mandir who is responsible for the creation of Kashmir. So the legend goes that her Vahana, Garuda, eagle, drops 2 major stones in the Satisar, and Satisar drains out, and so the land was created when Rishi Kashyap came and occupied it. So she is the presiding deity or the one who created Kashmir. This is in a mountain called Hari Parvat within the city of Srinagar. Just below this, you find Pokribal Mandir and Amarkol Mandir. Of course, you see some things written here, but things are getting revived now. These are under CRPF control right now. There is a mandir in a place called Tibetan Colony, which is called Vicharnag or Vacharnag. This is the place where many of the Shaiva Granthas were written. Every year, their Panchang used to be written here. Unfortunately, this is waterlogged now and it's inoperative. But this is the place which saw, in its heydays, great literature being produced on Kashmiri Shaivism. Just behind the governor's residence, there is Jeshta Devi Mandir. As usual, you can see, the mandir is in the middle of a natural spring. The ancient Murti was anyway broken long back, so a new one is established here. So this is something which is operational. In fact, any of you can go and stay there for free, cook your own food, and stay as long as you can. There is a temple in the heart of the city next to the UN body's office called Durganag Mandir. Again, here you have a natural spring which comes out, and the temple is in 3 layers. You can see 1, 2, and 3 layers. Huge mandir. You can see the chinar tree here, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm standing like a piddly in front of it. Massive, it's hundreds of years old chinar tree. You see, all these leaves are chinar leaves. Madam, I think you have thoughtfully put in the chinar leaves here to indicate the Kashmir connection. Wonderful. So, the chinar trees is like your Vatavruksha in our mandirs. It is something like that. Then somebody said Hanuman. So yes, Hanuman will be there everywhere. Hanuman is there in Amira Kadal. Amira Kadal saw a lot of stone pelting, a lot of nonsense before. But just next to the Vitasta river is Panchamukhi Hanuman, a massive mandir. And then Panchamukhi Shivling is also there here. There is a masjid called Shah Hamdan Masjid. Originally, this was Bhadrakali Mandir. We know it has been occupied. Kashmiri Pandits have painted it with their saffron here, Sindhur, on the outside of the wall to keep the memory alive. To say that this once was our Bhadrakali Mandir. It's in the history, but that's a affair. That's a sad state of affair here. Inside the Shah Hamdan Masjid, you can see the Garbhagriha still exists here. But they all pray to this corner. In that corner, they put some Islamic things and they pray, but that is in the corner. The old Garbhagriha still exists. Though there is no murti there, it still exists. Then, for people who believe that Jesus Christ was buried in Srinagar, there is a school of thought. There is a research done by Russians. There is a place called Rosebul in Srinagar, where the tomb of Jesus is supposed to be existing. Ahmadiyas believe that Jesus was buried here. So, but then Sunnis don't believe that he was buried there. So there is a controversy there, but still for academic purposes, those of you who are interested, there is this place which is claimed to be the tomb of burial place of Jesus Christ. That ends my, Srinagar temples presentation. Of course, there are a few more, but I kept it to the more important ones. Now let's go to the temples of South Kashmir. Again, as you can see, from Verinag, the southernmost point, up to Srinagar, you have tons and tons of thousands of temples all across the south of Kashmir. We all are aware of Amarnath. Definitely, I'm sure Kashmir, you will immediately recollect, you will connect to Amarnath. But then there are lots more to come. You've seen the poster outside of this Prangana, this place where you put that with Verinag spring. So Verinag is the origin of Vitasta river, Udgamasthana. This was originally a round, pond. Then Jahangir built it into an octagonal one. So, but still, it was very holy for Kashmiri Pandits. They used to immerse the ashes of their forefathers and do pindadan and things like that in this place. So the water collects from here and goes out through this, gushes out from here, and then it goes as a river which traverses through Srinagar, Udi, and merges with Kishanganga and ultimately into Sindhu river. Just outside this particular entrance, you have a mandir which is of a recent origin. The old mandir was long destroyed, but then some remnants of the old mandir are still available in this particular place. So it is still, Kashmiri Pandits do visit there whenever they can. Then of course, whoever has gone to Pahalgam or Amarnath, probably they would have seen these mandirs. I'm not going to dwell much upon it. Of course, the most famous Martand, madam, what you said, Martand Surya Mandir. This was destroyed by one of their sultans, Sultan by name Sikandar. Since he destroyed a temple, since he was famous for breaking idols, he was given the title But Shakin. But means an idol. Shakin means somebody who has broken idols. So But Shakin is a title given to him because he singularly was responsible for destruction of largest number of temples in Kashmir. You see, the richness of their sculptures can be seen in Martand temple even today. Thousands of pilgrimages used to stay in these places because it's so far away. If you go, you're not going to come back in 1 day, 2 days. You're going to stay there for months together. So all the provisions are created by the great Lalitaditya. Now, of course, down the hill, this is on a mountain actually, old Martand Mandir. Below that, a new Mandir, Surya Mandir has been built. This is operational. There are Kashmiri Pandits here. And this is called Martan Surya Mandir. Of course, both they call it Martand, Martan. But I chose to keep this as Martan and that as Martand so that we know that the old temple is Martand. There is another place called Vijay Vihara. They call it Beach Bihara. So this is again on the banks of Vitasta river. Since our festival is Vitasta, we are going to focus on a lot of temples on the banks of Vitasta. This again was broken by Sikandar Bushkin, but then it has been rebuilt a few centuries back. And if you go and see, the idols there, it's just amazing. Currently, it is under a Muslim caretaker there because there are no Pandits there. The keys and upkeep is taken care by a local Muslim there. Then there is Sriman Narayana and Garuda Vahana. And then inside, you find a very unique shivling which you will not find anywhere in the country. There are 11 shivlings on the single pedestal. And each shivling has 2 colors. You have Shiva, Parvati, Mishrama combination in each shivlinga and all 11 combined on a single pedestal. You will never find this kind of a unique shivling anywhere in the country. That is so unique to Kashmir. In fact, every mandir you have something very unique in Kashmir. Then there is a place called Thajiwada. Thajiwada was originally the starting point of Amarnath Yatra, where what they call as Chadi Mubarak. They used to carry this Chadi Mubarak from Thajiwada to Amarnath. But now, of course, because of the problems there, it is carried from Jammu now. But earlier, this was the starting point for them. There is Avanti Swamin temple just south of Srinagar. This is a Sriman Narayana temple, Vaishnava temple. This was again, subject to the iconoclasm of Sikandar Butshakin. Anantnag, this is a town which you cross when you're going to Pahalgam. In fact, Anantnag, there are many, many streams which come together into this pond and from there, the water goes out. Anantnag. And then there is Devi Nag Mandir. Behind that, there was a Hindu Mandir which is now converted into Kankhana by the Islamic, rulers there. There is a wonderful cave here, Bumzu Caves in Anantnag, where the shivlings are still there. Of course, there's no puja, nothing there. It's a cave which is empty now. But this dates back to something like Abhinav Gupta's period, very, very ancient caves here. This is the, now we're going to talk about Kheer Bhavani Mata Mandir. There are 3 Kheer Bhavani Mata Mandirs in Kashmir, not 1. South Kashmir, this is the Kheer Bhavani Mata Mandir, which is called Mansgam. There is no murti here. The natural spring itself is Mata. They revere the natural water itself as Ma. Then there is a place called Devsar, where Bala Tripura Sundari Mandir is. There is only Bala Tripura Sundari Mandir in the whole of Kashmir. Again, it is formed of natural, in a tree, you see her form. The Kashmiri Pandits are now rebuilding it. This photograph I had taken a few years back. Now the temple is completely rebuilt. This was destroyed in the 90s in the militancy period, but the revival is going on right now. There is a temple called Katyayani Devi in Bombay in Kulgam. This entire temple was bulldozed and pushed into a rivulet behind in 1992 Babri Masjid time. After almost 10, 12 years, Kashmiri Pandits went, and of course the Murti of the Mata was destroyed, but miraculously the Saligram survived after more than 10, 12 years. So they retrieved it and re-established this whole mandir. Even now, thousands of Kashmiris go there once a year and perform Havan there. So this is an active mandir. In Kulgam, which is hotbed of militancy, as you all know, but this is a thriving Hindu temple in the middle of all that. Then there is a wonderful Kausarnag Yatra in Kulgam. It's a beautiful lake in the middle of a mountain. You got to go trekking to that place. As usual, there is a rift going on. Some people have put up some stones to claim there is a masjid there. So in Kashmir, you will find this pretty often in many places. However, the yatra people are still going, Kashmiri Pandits are still going to this place. There is a place called Kokarnag. Kokarnag is the place very close to Kokarnag. Burhan Wani was encountered. Kokarnag is a place where you have this spring, natural spring called Bringi Tirth. I'm sure all of you know, Bringi is associated with Shiva. So Shringi and Bringi and we know all that. I'm not getting into that. But then look at the antiquity of this. Look at the connection to the great Sanatana traditions. There are no Hindus there, no Pandits here. There's a lovely garden there, but still the memory is still there that it's a Bringi Tirth. In fact, there is a local, like your Bisleri water bottle, there is a Bringi Tirth bottle comes out with the brand of Bringi. Close to that, there is a temple, a dilapidated temple called Sagam, Kokarnag. This is unfortunately needs restoration. Sad thing. And then also Akingam. Akingam has massive property. You can see acres and acres of beautiful land there. Unfortunately, this needs revival right now. There is a mandir in the heart of Shopian. Shopian is the most militant affected district in Kashmir. In Shopian, there is a Kapal Mochan mandir. You see the Shivling. This looks like, something like Rudraksh are planted onto it. It's a very, very, very unique Shivling. In fact, on top of this, it is left open to the sky. And if you go during Chile Kalan, that is the snow season, snow keeps falling on Bhagavan Shiva. It's a wonderful sight, actually. There are no security forces here. This is completely open. Razdan family is actually, taking care of this for 5-6 months in a year. You see they have written, Go India, Go on the walls here. But then the Razdan family is supported by the local Muslims. They provide them with milk, vegetables, whatever ration they need, completely supported by the local community there in this place, Shopian. So it's a wonderful example of how you have both stories. When you have stories of atrocities, you also have stories of cooperation. Now let's go to temples of North Kashmir. Again, it's a rich canvas of temples all across. The most famous of them is, of course, Kheer Bhavani Mata Mandir, which is Shira Bhavani in Tulla Mulla. You can see the original Saligram Murtis of Mata survived. These are not broken. In fact, this is the Mela where maximum number of Kashmiri Pandits go every year. And in fact, Mehbooba Mufti, when she was a chief minister, even she came and performed puja here. The uniqueness about this place is the spring water which emanates here changes color once in a while. So if it is white, then there is a certain meaning to it. If it is blue, there's a different meaning to it. But when it turns black or when it turns red, it signals some kind of a catastrophe. During 90s, when the attacks happened on the Pandits, these are turned black. Whenever major events happen, the water here turns different color. So that is something which is very unique to this place. It reflects how the Kashmir Valley is behaving now. If you have a clean water, that shows that there is no problem in the valley. So this is the greatness, uniqueness of this particular mandir. Another important feature in this particular mandir is, between the trees, you can see the map of Bharat. So this photograph I had taken in winter. And I'll show the same photograph which I had taken it post the rainy season. So it's a very unique feature that is there, natural phenomena that happens in this particular mandir. Then of course, whoever has gone to Gulmarg, they would have probably seen this mandir. At the steps where I'm standing, this is the place where the famous song Jai Jai Shiva Shankar was shot. Then en route to Baramulla, there is a town called Patan. There are two dilapidated temples here, Sugandesha Mandir and Shankara Gaurishwara temple. Shankara Gaurishwara is almost next to the railway station of Patan town. And somewhere interior of these places, there is a village called Chandarhama. You know, the name itself is still Chandarhama. Chandralinga is there. Unfortunately, it's locked. There are no pandits there. I took this photograph by putting my camera into the ventilator, and I took the photograph. But it's locked and it's preserved. It's not happened. Nothing is damaged. Waiting for all of you and all of us to go and do what we can. There's another temple called Manasbal. Partly it is excavated. You can see Ganesh here. This water goes into the lake called Manasbal Lake. The uniqueness of this is you can see there is snow everywhere, but this water doesn't freeze. So this water is perennial. Even in the thick of winter, even if it is minus 10 degrees, this does not freeze. The very uniqueness of this particular water here. There's a famous Prayagraj, where after 75 years, Kashmiri Pandits went and did Kumbh Mela there a few years back. In fact, the year when Burhan Wani was encountered. You can see it's a sangam of two rivers. You have Vitasta and you have Sindh river. Actually, this is not Sindhu, this is not Indus, we should not confuse. This river originates close to Sonmarg and joins Vitasta at this place called Narayan Bagh. In fact, Narayan Bagh is the village, but it is popularly known as Shadipora. So if you ask a taxi driver, he may not know Narayan Bagh. You would have to probably tell him Shadipora. That's the place where you have this. And the mandir here in the Sangam dates back to Nilmat Puran, maybe 2500 years, 200, 300 BC, Nilmat Puran. So that's the kind of antiquity this place reserves. But of course, the old temple is gone. They have built a new temple, a small temple now. There is Shivling there. When Kashmiri Pandits go there, they definitely have something to look to. Close to this place is the capital of the great king Lalitaditya Muktipida. He was the greatest king of Karkotaka dynasty. As you can see, his kingdom stretched from Caspian Sea to the Bay of Bengal. But we don't hear about him in any of our books. The sad story. His kingdom was much larger than Ashoka's kingdom, yet we don't talk about him. The greatest king to walk Kashmir was Lalitaditya Muktipida. He was the one who built all these mandirs. For me, this is as important a temple as any other temple, because this is the place from where the glory of Sanatana Dharma is spread across all the Central Asian countries. Then there is a place called Sumbal. This is also on the banks of Vitasta. But, this is abandoned. There's nobody there. A few years back, 2-3 years back, the local Muslims actually washed, cleaned it, and put up a poster asking the Kashmiri Pandits to come back. So this is again a place where, you have this kind of, changes that are happening. This is the main character in the Kashmir files, Bhasha Sumli, right? You can trace the origins to where they come from. Bhasha Sumli. Our name is Bhasha Sumli. Raghunath Mandir in Baramulla. By the way, how many of you know the actual meaning of Baramulla? Again, question is not for Kashmiri Pandits. See, when I ask this question, a lot of people tell me Baramulla, 12 mullahs. But actually it is Varaha Mula. So when I spoke about the Chakreshwari Mata Mandir and the origin of Kashmir, the water drained through Baramula. So from there the water went away. That's how Kashmir was formed. So today you have Raghunath Mandir and you have Gupta Ganga. Again, all these things are under the CRPF control. But you see the antiquity, the tree is so massive. the chinar tree is so massive. And then you have a very unique Ekamukhi Shivling. The face of Shiva protrudes out of the Shivling. There is a place called Koti Tirth. This, to Kashmiri Pandits, is as holy as, let's say, Dashashwameth Ghat of Kashi. They immerse the ashes of their forefathers here, and Shraddha, Pindadan, everything used to be done here. But again, since the old mandir has been broken and a new one is constructed by Rashtriya Rifles, but before this was constructed, the Sikh gurus built a Sikh Gurudwara just opposite to that to give protection to the Hindu community there. So Sikh Gurudwara, you can see an old Chinar branch here. This was the tree under which Guru Hargobind Singh sat. So once the tree died, they cut that and put it for darshan and for prayers. So here, the Sikh community is still thriving and surviving here. There is another unique mandir in Baramulla, which is called Shelaputri Devi Mandir. This you will find only in Baramulla, nowhere in the valley. Unfortunately, because of some calamity, the back part of the mandir collapsed and the water all got drained out. So the government has sanctioned sufficient amount of funds to reconstruct this, rejuvenate it, and so by the time probably next year you go, this would be live, thriving, and with water. Then there is a unique shivling in Baramulla, which is called Kanilbag Shivling. You can see it is almost 12 feet high. Of course, some want to dismiss this. This is not a shivling, but this is some marker. But then you can see the pedestal is very clearly like a shivling. So you can just imagine what is the size of the stone. How could they have chiseled such a massive shivling? It is, beyond our imagination. As you go towards the LOC, you see a place called Bunyari, where there are ancient temples, and this is like a jade stone, green jade stone, very unique stone, where very ancient mandir, exists even today. Of course, after Bunyari, you get to the line of control. In Udi town itself, outside the Udi town, you have, Pandav Mandir. First time when I went, it was like a shed. It was a simple building, nothing more. And there were idols of Pandavas, of Bhagavan Krishna and all. But then, a Odisha sadhu from Odisha, he lived there, he campaigned, collected money, and he completely reconstructed the building when I went next time. It is the unique effort of one sadhu to rebuild something on the line of control where nobody goes. Who dares go so far? But then he recreated this mandir. So hats off to people who are doing that kind of a great service. Then in Handwara also you have a very, very ancient Shiv Mandir. And this town also has some abandoned mandirs. And all these places are very, very holy to Kashmiri Pandit. I'm just skipping through the slides. In detail, probably you need to do your Google search and find out more about these places. Here I'll explain a little bit. There is a place called, Bhadrakali Mandir in a place called Vadipora. In Vadipora, there is a village called Badarkol. The name of the village is Badarkol, even now. Bhadrakali, Badarkol. This mandir was blasted by terrorists with gelatin sticks. The murti was blasted. You see this particular tree, there are no leaves here. This completely burnt. So when Rashtriya Rifles wanted to rebuild this, they wanted to cut the tree because it is dead. When they started cutting, red fluid started coming out of the tree. So they stopped it and they put a red cloth around it, and they've taken inside the mandir, just behind the murti, the new murti installed by Rashtriya Rifles. It is just behind that. And, this is under the protection of Rashtriya Rifles. You have to climb almost 400 steps to go up to this place. And then outside of Kupwara town, you have Trehgam Mandir. Again, you see there is a masjid and a mandir. Both share a common water tank here. Beyond that is what is called as the third Kir Bhavani Mandir, which is Tikkar Kir Bhavani. We saw Mansgam, we saw Tullamulla, and now we are seeing Tikkar. This is again a third Kir Bhavani Mata Mandir in Kupwara. The unique thing which is happening bang on the line of control in Titwal is a new Sharda Mandir is being constructed. And I'm sure all of you would have seen in social media, Ravindra Pandita has just started his yatra from Sringeri. He has picked up Mata's Murti. And on March the 22nd, he's going to install it. In fact, I'm also going there. We are all going to install Ma's Murti in this mandir. This photograph I took when the initial foundation was made. You see, these roads are the POJK roads. They actually can see this mandir. The road is, the Neelam Valley Road. Just across the river is the Pakistani controlled area. Then another side of north, you go to Bandipura. Again, there are very ancient Shivamurtis in a mandir there. Abhinav Gupta cave, which is in Birwa, which is actually Bhairava. The name of the town is, today they call it Birwa, but it is actually Bhairava. Javed is a very good friend of mine. He comes from Birwa. Javed Beg, you can follow his Twitter handle. He is taken upon himself to revive Abhinav Gupta's yatra and recreate the glory of Abhinav Gupta. You can see his tweets. He is fighting for revival of the glorious Abhinav Gupta tradition in Birwa. As you can see, he's trying to reach here where they put up some green flags and all. He's trying to reclaim that for the glory of Abhinav Gupta. Then there is a Sharda Mandir. After the Sharda Mandir in POJK was lost, a new mandir was built in Bandipora. The ancient saligrams are still here, some of them. Towards Kargil, you get a town called Kangan. From Kangan, you go to a place called Naranag. A massive, you see from here to here, almost spread over some 10 to 12 acres, you have a massive temple complex dating back to more than 1500 years. Massive Shiv Mandir, and only one Shivlinga is available, rest are all broken, that to the open sky. But you can see the Shivlings that were left behind by many travelers here. Very, very unique place that is there in Naranag. Naranag is the base camp up to which your vehicles go. But from there, you see, you go to a place called Harmukh Parvatar Gangbal Yatra. You need to travel 2 days by trekking in the mountains to go to this Gangbal. You see this mountain, unless I tell you that this is Harmukh Parvat, probably you will mistake it for Kailash. So it is exactly like Kailash Parvat. And, there is the Gangbal. And Kashmiri Pandits go there every year on Ganga Ashtami, which is 4th day after Ganesh Chaturthi. There is a unique Ganesh in the middle of river towards Kargil, which is, you can see the Ganesh formation here in a place called Ganivan. Then the last valley which I spoke about, Gurez Valley. Gurez Valley, you see there is a village called Tarbal. This mountain is in the Pakistani control. This is the line of control. This is the last village in Gurez. So I had the great opportunity to perform Rudrabhisheka there and share the prasad with our boys there. Then I'll quickly conclude with a few temples in occupied Kashmir. We all know Sharda Peeth is in the Pakistani occupation. Then there are Manthal Buddhas in Skardu. Skardu is again an island surrounded 3 sides by Indus River, Sindhu River, Karga Buddhas. And then you have Hunza Nagara, you have Buddhist relics. And then you have in Mangala Dam was constructed. So all these mandir, Raghunath Mandir and Mangala Devi Mandir, all got submerged in that dam. So in Mirpur, you have great mandirs. Even in Gilgit-Baltistan, you had great Shivalayas, which are all destroyed. So these are all lands which legally belong to us, Gilgit-Baltistan and POJK. So what is the road ahead now? So we need to restore our lost territories. The map that was handed over to us by Raja Hari Singh should be restored in full. Then restoration of Sharda Peeth to its full glory. This is the current situation. This was the old photograph. But then we need to bring back Ma Sharda into it. You see there is an idol Ma Sharda here, just opposite to the Samadhi of the founder of Vijayanagar Empire. So Vidyaranya Tirtha's Samadhi you would have seen in Sringeri. So just opposite to that is a murti where no puja is done. But it is believed that Adi Shankara brought this from Sharda Peeth in Kashmir and installed it there. So it is but natural that Ravindra Pandita and others have taken an idol from, not this, but they have taken another new idol from Sringeri to reinstall in Sharda Peeth. That should be our aim. Of course, Sharda Lipi has to be re-established. It has to be brought back, restored to its full glory. Please remember, the more you go to Kashmir, the more you claim it. Sitting here, we can be WhatsApp jockeys. It will not help. We have to go to the ground. We got to go to our temples, pray to Bhagavan to restore our ancient glory and restore our Akhand Bharat. Kashmir was, is, and will always be part of Bharatavarsha. Namaste Sharada Devi, Kashmira Puravasini, Tvam Aham Prataye Nityam Vidya Danam Cha Dehi Me. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Mr. Giridhar Mamidi ji. We should have Mr. Giridhar Mamidi in every Indian classroom to holistically fuse Indian geography and history to every Indian child. Thank you so much, sir. You took us on a beautiful yatra, and like a yatri, we came behind you, and you showed us this beautiful canvas of Kashmir. So many temples, we had no clue, and this is exactly what Vitasta aims.
Any questions anyone has?
Does anybody have any questions? Can we please pass the mic on to the gentleman?
Short questions.
Yeah, can we keep it short because we're running short of time?
So, thank you very much, Giridhar sir. So, one of the key things that I wanted to ask from a long time from some Kashmiri expert is that in Sanskrit, Kashmira phalam is what is apple. So, I wanted to know if you know that whether from a tree anthropology perspective, it was apples which traveled to the west rather than to east. Is there any study like that or anything, pertaining? You have, shown so much. And secondly, the similar question on the trees. So chinar is actually the maple tree, which is on the Canadian flag. So there is also a theory that the chinar tree also traveled from Kashmir to all parts of the world. So do you have any study or anything related to that?
Yeah, apple probably was not a native of Kashmir. Since the rest of the country did not have a word for apple, they just called it Kashmira phala. So that's my take on it. But I'm open to be corrected if that's not the case. But essentially, we don't have a word for apple in any language. So it's probably come from somewhere outside. As far as chinar is concerned, this has been there for thousands of years. And yes, probably chinar leaves are available even in Canada, for instance, in not many other places. Probably where the weather suits it, it's available. That is very unique to Kashmir. And you see in all temples, like what we have, Vatavruksha, people trees in our mandirs, they have this, chinar trees where they do puja to it. And it has spread from there to many other places. Yes, that's true. True, exactly. That's what I said. It's like our Vatavruksha, exactly what we do in South India. It's what they do in Kashmir as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your abundant knowledge and information, sir.
There's a question there. Yeah?
Namaste, sir. I wanted to ask that we noticed in every picture almost, there is a spring in every temple. So is there any significance of that, or it's just a natural phenomenon?
See, it's just, of course it is very unique to Kashmir that they built their mandirs, they built their religious things around nature and natural, features. But then, this is not something unique to Kashmir alone. You see, even in Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, you had connection to these things. You had water, what the archaeologists call as great baths. You have Koneru or Kolanu in all our mandirs even now. So the ancient Bharat always had a water body and a tree to symbolize it. It could be chinar there, it could be people or, Vatavruksha for us. This you would find across the canvas of North. If you go to places where there are no temples or temples destroyed, still you will find all these places. Like I think it is mentioned that I've been to a lot of Mahabharat sites. A lot of Mahabharat sites you identify with these ponds. There is a place called Gadmukteshwar, 100 kilometers from Delhi, which is the closest point to Ganga. There also there is Nahusha Kupa. With Yudhishthira Nahusha Samvada happened. And there is a people tree and there is this. Of course, mandirs are built later. So that is how the culture was in ancient times. Kashmiris have maintained it. They have retained it. Adi Shankara went to Sharada Peeth, and when the whole country was engulfed in Buddhism, he brought those books back and revived Sanatana Dharma in the rest of the country. And for that, he himself considered Kashmir as his guru. From there, he revived Sanatana Dharma, and we should be all thankful to the Kashmiri Hindus for retaining the great tradition.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Giridhar Mamidiji, for such an educative session. We will break for a very short tea break, and we'll assemble back in 5 minutes because we're running a little short of time. So I kindly request you all to have your tea and assemble in your seats in 5 minutes. We will resume session two after the break. Thank you so much.
Vitasta, now known as the River Jhelum, flows through the verdant valley of Kashmir as it has done from time immemorial. A lifeline for its people, with boats, big and small, carrying trade and sustenance. Vitasta, now known as the River Jhelum, flows through the verdant valley of Kashmir as it has done from time immemorial. A lifeline for its people, with boats, big and small, carrying trade and sustenance on its calm waters. In mythology, the Vitasta is worshipped as a manifestation of the goddess Parvati, consort of the great Lord Shiva, and it is Parvati who created the river at his special request. Mentioned in the Rig Veda as one of the 21 prominent rivers of India, the legend of the Vitasta sustains the imagination of India. The Nenamata Puran refers to Kashmir as Vitastika, the land of the river Vitasta. In the Mahabharata it says, if anybody bathes in the waves of the river with vow and fasts for 7 days, he would become as pure as a hermit. This mystical space, carried forward by the indigenous Sufis or the Rishis in the early 14th century after the advent of Islam, is manifested in the sacred architecture of Kashmir, in the shrines and the khankas along its bank. Vitasta has sustained civilizations. It has given birth to crafts and culture, a philosophy and poetry, to great kingdoms that remain its legacy today. Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir. It flows on and on. Vitasta, now known as the River Jhelum, flows through the verdant valley of Kashmir as it has done from time immemorial. A lifeline for its people, with boats, big and small, carrying trade and sustenance on its calm waters. In mythology, the Vitasta is worshipped as a manifestation of the goddess Parvati, consort of the great Lord Shiva, and it is Parvati who created the river at his special request. Mentioned in the Rig Veda as one of the 21 prominent rivers of India, the legend of the Vitasta sustains the imagination of India. The Nenamata Puran refers to Kashmir as Vitastika, the land of the river Vitasta. In the Mahabharata it says, if anybody bathes in the waves of the river with vow and fasts for 7 days, he would become as pure as a hermit. This mystical space, carried forward by the indigenous Sufis or the Rishis in the early 14th century after the advent of Islam, is manifested in the sacred architecture of Kashmir, in the shrines and the khankas along its bank. Vitasta has sustained civilizations. It has given birth to crafts and culture, a philosophy and poetry, to great kingdoms that remain its legacy today. Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir. It flows on and on. Vitasta, now known as the river Jhelum, flows through the verdant valley of Kashmir as it has done from time immemorial. A lifeline for its people, with boats, big and small, carrying trade and sustenance on its calm waters. In mythology, the Vitasta is worshipped as a manifestation of the goddess Parvati, consort of the great Lord Shiva, and it is Parvati who created the river at his special request. Mentioned in the Rig Veda as one of the 21 prominent rivers of India, the legend of the Vitasta sustains the imagination of India. The Nelamata Puran refers to Kashmir as Vitastika, the land of the river Vitasta. In the Mahabharata it says, if anybody bathes in the waves of the river with vow and fasts for 7 days, he would become as pure as a hermit. This mystical space, carried forward by the indigenous Sufis or the Rishis in the early 14th century after the advent of Islam, is manifested in the sacred architecture of Kashmir, in the shrines and the khankas along its bank. Vitasta has sustained civilizations. It has given birth to crafts and culture, a philosophy and poetry, to great kingdoms that remain its legacy today. Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir. It flows on and on. Vitasta, now known as the river Jhelum, flows through the verdant valley of Kashmir as it has done from time immemorial. A lifeline for its people, with boats, big and small, carrying trade and sustenance on its calm waters. In mythology, the Vitasta is worshipped as a manifestation of the goddess Parvati, consort of the great Lord Shiva, and it is Parvati who created the river at his special request. Mentioned in the Rig Veda as one of the 21 prominent rivers of India, the legend of the Vitasta sustains the imagination of India. The Nelamata Puran refers to Kashmir as Vitastika, the land of the river Vitasta. In the Mahabharata it says, if anybody bathes in the waves of the river with vow and fasts for 7 days, he would become as pure as a hermit. This mystical space, carried forward by the indigenous Sufis or the Rishis in the early 14th century after the advent of Islam, is manifested in the sacred architecture of Kashmir, in the shrines and the khankas along its bank. Vitasta has sustained civilizations. It has given birth to crafts and culture, a philosophy and poetry, to great kingdoms that remain its legacy today. Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir. It flows on and on. Vitasta, now known as the river Jhelum, flows through the verdant valley of Kashmir as it has done from time immemorial. A lifeline for its people, with boats, big and small, carrying trade and sustenance on its calm waters. In mythology, the Vitasta is worshipped as a manifestation of the goddess Parvati, consort of the great Lord Shiva, and it is Parvati who created the river at his special request. Mentioned in the Rig Veda as one of the 21 prominent rivers of India, the legend of the Vitasta sustains the imagination of India. The Neelamata Puran refers to Kashmir as Vitastika, the land of the river Vitasta. In the Bharata it says, if anybody bathes in the waves of the river with vow and fasts for 7 days, he would become as pure as a hermit. This mystical space, carried forward by the indigenous Sufis or the Rishis in the early 14th century after the advent of Islam, is manifested in the sacred architecture of Kashmir, in the shrines and the khankas along its bank. Vitasta has sustained civilizations. It has given birth to crafts and culture, a philosophy and poetry, to great kingdoms that remain its legacy today. Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir. It flows on and on. Vitasta, now known as the river Jhelum, flows through the verdant valley of Kashmir as it has done from time immemorial. A lifeline for its people, with boats, big and small, carrying trade and sustenance on its calm waters. In mythology, the Vitasta is worshipped as a manifestation of the goddess Parvati, consort of the great Lord Shiva, and it is Parvati who created the river at his special request. Mentioned in the Rig Veda as one of the 21 prominent rivers of India, the legend of the Vitasta sustains the imagination of India. The Neelamata Puran refers to Kashmir as Vitastika, the land of the river Vitasta. In the Bharata it says, if anybody bathes in the waves of the river with vow and fasts for 7 days, he would become as pure as a hermit. This mystical space, carried forward by the indigenous Sufis or the Rishis in the early 14th century after the advent of Islam, is manifested in the sacred architecture of Kashmir, in the shrines and the khankas along its bank. Vitasta has sustained civilizations. It has given birth to crafts and culture, a philosophy and poetry, to great kingdoms that remain its legacy today. Vitasta, the ever-flowing legacy of Kashmir. It flows on and on.
I request Srimati Revati Ramachandran, Director of Kalakshetra Foundation, to please come to the dais. I request Dr. C.K. Garyali, our next speaker, to please adorn the dais. Srimati Revati Ramachandran will now felicitate Dr. C.K. Garyali. Dr. C.K. Garyali, a postgraduate from the Delhi School of Social Work and a doctorate in women's studies, is a retired civil servant in the Indian Administrative Service, having held various administrative positions in various important government organizations during her career. She has served as Principal Secretary to the Governor of Tamil Nadu and Secretary, Social Welfare Development, and is a noted author of several books. Dr. C.K. Garyali has amassed a wealth of knowledge on our rich culture and heritage from her wide travels through the length and breadth of our nation. Dr. C.K. Garyali, we are looking forward to your talk on Kashmir and Buddhism. Over to her.
My dear Revati ji, distinguished speakers, Rao Sahab, Gupta ji, friends, scholars, faculty of Kalakshetra. Can I have the light, please, to see the paper? Can I have the light? Light? Yeah. So, I'm very pleased to speak about Buddhism and Kashmir. We have been hearing yesterday we had an excellent talk of Buddhism by Mrs. Advaita Vadini Kaul, who spoke about the Buddhist literature. She's done a PhD in Buddhism, and it was an excellent talk. The references have been made about Buddhism by various scholars. Today, Rao Sahab spoke about it, and many other scholars have also referred to it. So I am not talking of literature. I'll talk how it was connected with our life as Kashmiri Pandits and how it was part of Kashmir and how we were involved in what is our legacy of Buddhism. I'll start with my childhood. As a child, during a homam or yajna, we used to hear priests propitiating the three Buddhist divines, Triratnas, which included Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, along with Vedic and Hindu gods and goddesses. This ritual was the vestige of our Buddhist past, which we had not forgotten. Our ancestors fasted on the day of Vaishak Purnima, the day on which Buddha was born, gained enlightenment, and attained nirvana. It was a day of great celebration, and many new ventures were initiated on this day. The 11th century eminent Kashmiri scholar Kshemendra commenced writing his famous treatise on Advan Kalpalata on this day. Nilmad Puran has described the celebration of Vaishak Purnima in Kashmir. According to Nilmad Puran, Vaishak Purnima was celebrated with great pomp and show. The Buddhist monasteries, chaityas and viharas were decorated with flowers and paintings. The Lord Buddha's statues were anointed with herbs, flowers, and gems. These traditions continued till the advent of Islamic period in 14th century. The Buddhist connection of Kashmir. The connection between Buddha and Kashmir seems to be very, very ancient. Sir Charles Eliot, in his book Hinduism and Buddhism, mentions Buddha's visit to Kashmir. Imagine Buddha himself has traveled to Kashmir. Some of the Sanskrit versions of Vinaya texts refer to Buddha visiting Mathura, northeast India, and Kashmir. According to Chinese sources, Buddhism arrived in Kashmir within 50 years of Buddha's Mahaparinirvana. According to Divya Vandana, Ashoka invited several scholars from Kashmir to Patliputra to attend the third Buddhist council in year 2047 BC, which indicates that Kashmir was already a center of Buddhism by then, and it was not introduced in Kashmir by Ashoka. He himself has invited scholars to his conference in Patliputra. The archaeological excavation dating back to 1st to 6th century AD in Kashmir show the Kashmir Valley dotted with numerous Buddhist monasteries. However, the excavations from Harvan and Ushkur are the most prominent. Many artifacts from Harvan can be seen in Sri Pratap Singh Museum. It appears that Buddhist university and settlement were spread over the entire hillside of Harvan. Kashmir had the honor of hosting the fourth and last Buddhist council at Harvan University during the reign of King Kanishka. Nagarjuna, the great bodhisattva, lived and worked in Harvan and guided the council. In fact, in the ruins, they have identified a place recently which they say could be possibly the house of Nagarjuna. Vasu Gupta, a learned Kashmiri Brahmin, presided over the council with his deputy Ashwagosha. According to Chinese scholar and visitor Huan Song, the entire proceedings of the Fourth Buddhist Council were inscribed on copper plates, placed in stone boxes, and deposited in a vihara. Since then, these copper plates have not been seen and lay buried somewhere in the valley. It is possible, like famous Gilgit manuscripts, these copper plates may be unearthed in the near future. Following the Fourth Buddhist Council, a large number of Kashmiri intellectuals took to missionary work, and hundreds of the wisest sons of Kashmir Valley carried the torch of Indian civilization, culture, and Buddhism to Tibet, China, Japan, Korea, Afghanistan, Java, Sumatra, and other places. Dr. P.C. Bagchi, in his book India and China, writes, Kashmir takes the leading part in transmission of Buddhist thought and traditions directly to China and Tibet. The number of Buddhist scholars who went to China from Kashmir is larger than those who went from rest of India. Kashmir was the flourishing center of Buddhism or Sarva Vastivada school. Some of the most important missionaries were Kumarajiva, Vimalaksha, Sanghabhuti, Gautama, Sangha, Buddha Vyasa, Gunavarma, Dharmaputra, Shamabhatta, Yasa, and Buddhijiva. According to Padma Bhushan Dr. Lokesh Chandra, the author of India's contribution to world thought and culture, Kashmiri Pandits went to Central Asia, Tibet, China, Korea, Japan, and Philippines for the dissemination of culture, art, and philosophy of India. Japan had a tradition of writing the Sanskrit shloka in Siddham calligraphy, which comes from top to bottom. It is a major art in Japan and was taught to them by two great Kashmiri Pandit scholars, Prajna and Munishri. The Siddham calligraphy was a gift of Kashmiri Pandits to Japan. Kumarajiva. Yesterday we heard about Kumarajiva from Madam Kaul also. The great Buddhist scholar Kumarajiva came to Kashmir from Khotan to study Ayurveda and astrology. He later spread the message of Mahayana Buddhism in China. He was the son of Kumarayana, a Kashmiri scholar who went to Central Asia and worked as a royal priest in the court of King Jiva of Kucha. Kucha is the present-day Badakhshan. He married the princess of Kusha, Jivika, and this child was born to both of them. Kumar Jiva's mother, Jivika, took holy vows and entered Seoli nunnery in Kucha when he was only 7. By this age, he had by-hearted many sutras and texts. At the age of 9, she took him to Kashmir to study Digra Agma, Madhya Agma, and Shudraka with Bandhu Datta. He became an exponent of Nagarjuna's Madhyamika school of Mahayana. When he was 20, King Pushan requested Kumar Jiva to return to Kucha to instruct his daughter, who had become a nun. Kumar Jiva was well versed in many languages, including Sanskrit. His greatest contribution has been the translation of the Lotus Sutra from Sanskrit to Chinese. He also translated the Diamond Sutra, Amitabh Sutra, Vimalkirti Nirdesh Sutra, to name a few. Chinese emperor confirmed upon the title of Tugsho for his outstanding contribution to popularize Buddhism. It means that though young in age, mature in wisdom. It is said that because of his influence, 90% of the Chinese population became Buddhist. Recently, Chinese erected a monument of Kumar Jiva and also instituted a prize for scholars in his name. Prince Gunavarma. Prince Gunavarma belonged to royal family of Kashmir. He entered the Buddhist order at the age of 20. At the age of 30, he was offered the royal throne after the death of the king, but he declined. Instead, he became a Buddhist monk. He was the first traveler to go by the Southern Asiatic route to China, Japan, Korea to preach Buddhism. He also went to Sri Lanka and Java. Buddhism gained a firm footing in Java because of him. From Java, Buddhism traveled to Sumatra well before 15th century. By the 7th century, the king of Sumatra, Shri Vijaya, had accepted Buddhism. With the conversion of royal family, the entire population of the island of Sumatra adopted Buddhism. He was a great translator of Buddhist scriptures and translated 11 important works from Sanskrit to Chinese in 18 volumes with the collaboration of another Kashmiri Pandit scholar, Dharmamitra. He was an artist and painter. And like Kumar Jiva, he painted the Jataka stories of Buddha in many public halls of China. Virochana. Virochana propagated Buddhist in Khotan and Gandhara. He also preached in Bamiyan in Afghanistan. Bamiyan became a great center of Buddhism and was well known for its giant Buddha sculptures. Unfortunately, this World Heritage Site was destroyed by Taliban in 2001 to rid Afghanistan of idolatry. King Meghavarma. Meghavarma was pious and strong Hindu king with Buddhist leanings. He stopped the killing of animals and birds throughout his kingdom. He undertook to conquest of many countries to stop animal slaughter. His chief queen, Amrita Prabha, built the Amrit Bhavan Vihara for foreign pilgrims and students who came to Kashmir to study in large numbers. Huansong. Huansong arrived in Kashmir in 6031-6033 AD during the reign of King Durbal Vardhana, where he was given a royal reception and treated as a state guest. He described Kashmir as a flourishing center of Buddhism, rivaling Magadha, and talks about the existence of over 100 monasteries and 5,000 monks. He studied scriptures with talented Kashmiri scholars and monks such as Vinita Prabha, Chandravarman, and Jayagupta for 2 years. Even though he visited Kashmir much later, he mentions in his account that Emperor Ashoka made a gift of valley to the Buddhist Sangha. Huansong mentions staying at Ganpat Yar Vihara. Ganpat Yar is a Ganesh temple. There was a vihara next to it where he has stayed. He called it Vrihat Vihara. Today it is known as Badayar. Vrihat is Bada and Badayar. He also mentioned Jainendra Vihara in Srinagar, which contained a large wooden idol of Buddha. Kashmiri influence of Buddhist art and architecture. The Buddhist architecture of Kashmir falls into 3 divisions. The first is the architecture of Harvard belonging to Indo-Parthian style. The second is the architecture of Khushkapur built by King Khushka in the 1st century AD in Gandhara style. The third is seen in the remains of Pandithan near Srinagar built in Gupta style. The sculpture of Mahamaya, Buddha's mother, along with her sister, before the birth of Buddha is a significant find of the Gupta period with Kashmiri influence. The sculpture shows Mahamaya wearing long earrings, a dejharu, which is worn even today by the married Kashmiri Hindu women. The monasteries of Rinch and Zangpu. In the 19th century, Buddhism was on decline in Guje due to the persecution by Bon rulers. The Guje then consisted of vast areas of Ladakh, Spiti, Kannauр, Jansar, Nepal, and Purang in western Tibet. This situation, however, changed when King Yesho O came to the throne in 1947. By a royal decree, he sent 22 young scholars to Kashmir to learn Sanskrit and understand the true essence of Buddhism. Out of 22, only 2 survived, and they were Rinchen Zangpu and his 13-year-old Rinchen Zangpu and his cousin Lekpi Sherab. They were able to survive through the harsh journey which they made from to Kashmir. They later came to be known as greater translator and lesser translator. They studied under Shaddakara Varma, Sanskrit, philosophy, tantric practices, and Buddhist scriptures for 7 years. Rinchen Zangpu also studied Yoga Tantra and Ratnavarja, and I believe he studied for 75 teachers. After returning to Tibet, Rinchen Zangpu and Lekpi constructed the royal monastery at Toling. A number of Pandits from Kashmir joined them in translating the Sanskrit text into Tibetan. In all, Rinchen Zangpo built 108 monasteries in Himalayas. He brought 32 best Kashmiri Pandit artists to create icons, sculptures, murals connected with the life of Buddha. Some of these have survived the time, which include the Tobo Monastery in Spiti, Poo Monastery in Kannauр, Richling Monastery in Nepal, and the celebrated Alchi Monastery in Ladakh. At Alchi Monastery, one can see the most exquisite artwork on the walls created by Kashmiri Pandit artists 900 years ago, representing mixture of Kashmiri, Tibetan, and Central Asian artistic traditions. The film producer Binoy Bahl has recently produced a film about Alchi, which conveys clearly that it was Kashmiri artists who painted all the monasteries in the Himalayan region, and their immense artistic contribution helped in revival of Buddhism in that region. Comparing the art of these monasteries with other works of art in India, he calls them the finest trans-Himalayan pieces of art comparable to Ajanta and Tanjore. Some of these monasteries, such as Subda monasteries, is located as 2,500 feet above the sea level and could be reached only after undertaking a very arduous journey. Even though Buddhism totally disappeared from the valley with the advent of Islam in 14th century, we can proudly say that credit for preserving the legacy of Buddhism in Ladakh and Tibet goes to Kashmiri Pandit scholars and artists who made tremendous contribution. Lastly, I want to touch a controversial topic. It was just touched just now by my colleague scholar. Did Jesus teach at the Buddhist University at Harvard? One of the highly controversial and mysterious legends of Kashmir is that Jesus Christ lived in Kashmir. According to legend, Jesus visited India twice, once during his missing years between the age of 13 and 30, when he studied scriptures, yoga, and Buddhism in Puri, Varanasi, Kashmir, and Tibet. Again, after he rose from the dead on Easter Sunday, he returned to Kashmir. In Kashmir, he taught at the Buddhist University at Harvard and left his mortal body at the age of 80 and is buried at Rosabal in Srinagar. As a teenager, I have seen the tomb of Jesus. They are called Yuz Asaf as Rosabal in Khaniyar in downtown Srinagar with my mother, because we have a custom of visiting all the mazar of the sages, all the samadhi of the sages. In 1964, I visited. I have seen the rock inside the tomb with crucifixion marks of the feet. First mention of this was made, of Jesus present in Kashmir, was made by the 19th century Russian journalist and adventurer Nikolai Notovich. He took refuge in a monastery after he broke his leg while visiting Ladakh in 1894. There he learned about the existence of manuscripts in Sanskrit and Pali detailing the life of Jesus in Kashmir, preserved in Hemis and other monasteries. He finally made it to Hemis and saw the monastery. He wrote his account in his book called Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. A century later, inspired by the accounts of Notovich, Holger Cretsen went to Kashmir and Ladakh in search of evidence and wrote his book, Jesus Lived in India, in 1993. According to Kristen, there are other witnesses before and after Notovich who have heard about or seen the manuscript, such as Mrs. Harvey, who wrote The Adventures of Lady in Tartary, Tibet, China, and Kashmir in 1853, before the visit of Notovich. Swami Abhedanand, who saw the manuscript in 1922 while he was on a pilgrimage of Ladakh. Nicholas Dorich, a Russian painter who investigated the matter with the people of Ladakh in 1925. Lady Henrietta Merrick, who confirmed the existence of manuscript in her book titled From the World's Attic, published in 1931. In 1939, a Swiss lady, Madame Elizabeth Kaspari, visited Hemis Monastery while on a pilgrimage to Mount Kailash, and the librarian of the Hemis Monastery showed her the manuscript. Nobody seemed to have seen the manuscript after that. Unfortunately, Hemis Monastery is now under Chinese occupation, and no one knows the fate of these manuscripts after China took over. As per the local tradition, the tomb belonged to a pre-Islamic foreign prophet, Yusuf, meaning Jesus the Gatherer. It was declared a tomb of a Muslim saint when Bulbul Shah, the founder of Islam in Kashmir, visited the tomb in 14th century. He said it is the tomb of a Muslim saint. Ahmadiyya writer Fida Hussain refers to the rock in the tomb with crucifixion marks as that of Jesus Christ's feet. Besides, he says the body is buried in Jewish tradition and not in Islamic tradition. After the publication of Creston's book, the tourist flow to tomb increased a great deal, creating some problems. Currently, tourists are not allowed to visit the tomb. It is kept closed, and the Sunni Muslim board has taken over the tomb from the traditional local caretakers. Thank you.
Kashmir has been such an important seat of Buddhist art, architecture, artists, and scholars. Thank you so much, Dr. C.K. Garyali, ma'am, for making us understand how important Buddhism was as a part of classical Kashmiri culture. Thank you so much, ma'am. We shall now proceed to the next talk of session 1. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. C.K. Garyali? Yes, ma'am. Can we have a mic for sir?
You know, Jesus rose from the dead on the Easter Sunday. He came out, everybody saw him bodily. Actually, he never died. He went into Yoga Nidra because he has learned yoga and all that samadhi in India. He never died on cross. According to legend, he was put in the thing, and then he came out, and everybody saw. His disciple touched him, and he told everybody to disperse so that they can go to different, because they were all in danger. So he himself went back to what he knew. He knew Kashmir, he knew India, where they say between the age of 13 and 30, he was taken by the merchants who were traveling, the caravan of merchants were traveling. When they saw, I'm narrating from the manuscript. So the manuscript says, when they saw this 13-year-old boy glowing with all the great aura, these merchants coming from India, the caravan of merchants, they identified by the boy as a very special spiritual person and thought they should be properly educated. And they brought him with them to India. He was at Jagannath Puri, he was at Varanasi, he was in Lahore, he was in Kashmir, he was in Tibet. And at the age of 30, he went back and then he preached. See, nobody knows, nobody in Bible can explain where he was between the age of 13 and 30. This manuscript tries to explain that he was in India. And he goes back, and they say another thing, that his philosophy was entirely different from old philosophy of Bible. The if you go at the Old Testament, it says eye for the eye. But Jesus said, no. If somebody, he said, return the love and compassion. He's talked of non-violence. Earlier they said the God is vengeful. If you see old, so they say it is marked Buddhist influence and Indian influence on Christ, when he went back, he taught a different philosophy than that of Old Testament. So his philosophy was totally inclusive. He accepted the prostitute, he accepted the lepers, and he had acquired all the siddhis. He could make the dead person, Lazarus, alive, and all those things. So manuscript details all those things. I will not bring the detail. This is what manuscript says, and yeah, this is what these people who have seen the manuscript have written about it. So we have read all that. So this is the thing how it happened. He rose, and after rising only, like everybody dispersed, the Mary and his mother went to, Mary Magdalene and Mary, mother of Jesus, they went to France. And everybody went somewhere. Santiago, he went to Spain. Like that, they had to go. St. Thomas came to India. He got into an Arab merchant ship because they all would have been killed there if they had stayed there. So he told them to disperse. And thereby he knew that his message was also go all around the world. So they were able to disperse, and he himself came back where he knew, where he had studied, and they say he was actually a professor in University of Harvard. So this is what is the legend, and when manuscripts can't be anymore seen, so this is the story. I just wanted to tell you, it's very controversial, many Christians don't like it, but this is what is come out through the research of these Russians and all that. Thank you very much.
We have another question.
Who is that?
Gentleman is coming.
Okay. Buddhism went to other countries, yes.
Japan and other countries. How it is adapted?
That same building, same place.
And what is the Buddhism in different countries? How it is that?
Yes, I'll be brief, Revati ji. I'll just answer briefly. It is adopted with the different places and local culture. You know, if you go to Sri Lanka, it is very different. You know, there are some monks who don't even pluck a fruit from the tree. If you go to Ladakh, everybody eats meat and everything, and even beef, you know, because it's a requirement of climate and everything. There is more Tantra in Ladakh because Tantra went from Kashmir there. That's not in Sri Lanka. So, and then Chinese, the Japanese went more into Zen Buddhism, which is on meditation based, which we say went from Kanchipuram. The Bodhidharma went from Kanchipuram through Kashmir to Japan, to China, and the Dhyan, meditation became Chan, and then it went to Japan, it became Zen. So basic philosophy is same. The Lotus Sutra, which they worship as the essence of Buddhism, went from India. It is a Lotus Sutra, same. Now we say Nam-myoho, Rengyo-kyo, or whatever we say. It has taken different form. Meditation is same. You may sit in lotus position, or you may sit like zazen on your knees. The fact is, it is meditation, it is eightfold path, it is 5 Panchashilas, it is the same philosophy. It's compassion, it is love, it is non-violence.
Thank you very much, Dr. C.K. Garyali. We now move on to our third talk in session 1. I request Director of Kalakshetra Foundation, Srimati Revati Ramachandran, to please come to the dais and felicitate our next speaker, Shri Rajneesh. Professor Rajneesh Mishra, can you please adorn the dais? Professor Rajneesh Mishra teaches at the School of Sanskrit and Indic Studies since 2001, where his teaching and research areas revolve Kashmir Shaivism, comparative politics, and comparative religion. Publisher of several research papers nationally and internationally, Professor Rajneesh Mishra has published a widely reviewed book titled Buddhist Theory of Meaning and Literary Analysis, and Shaiva Philosophy and Literary Theory. We are very proud to have him in our midst today. He's about to enlighten us on the agamic assumptions of Abhinavagupta's poetics and aesthetics. Over to you, sir.
My namaskar to all of you. I begin with two verses of invocation. Nrittavasane nataraj rajo nanad dhakkam navapanchavaram uddhartu kama sanakadi siddhan etad vimarshe sivasutra jalam. It's a very famous verse from Nandikeshwar Kashika. And since God Nataraj is with us, it's very appropriate to begin with his prayer. And I would also like to recite another verse, that is the Nandi part of Abhigyan Shakuntalam. That is, Ya srishtihi srasturadya vahati vidhyutam ya havirya chahotri ye dvekalam vidhattah sruti vishayaguna ya istita vyapya vishwam Yamahu sarvabije prakritiriti yaya praninah pranavantah pratakshabhi prapannastanubhirvatu vastabhirishtabhirisha. This is the invocation of 8 visible forms of Bhagavan Shiva. You know, other forms, maybe there is a suggested sense here, that other forms are beyond the purview of our senses. And since this Nandi part is recited in the beginning of Drishya Kavya, so it is quite logical that Kalidas is invoking those 8 visible forms and praying this God, Mahadeva, Shiva, to be present or to unfold himself, herself, within the realm of our senses. So, with this, I think I should pay my regards to the founder of this Kalakshetra, Srimati Rukmini Devi and Arundel ji. This is my first visit to this wonderful place, vibrant with energy, Kala energy, one should say, and I'm really overwhelmed. And I'm equally grateful to Revati ji, who invited me, and Professor Bharat Gupta ji, who I think made this possible for me to visit this wonderful place. Sri Rao ji here, Virendra Kaji ji, and many more dignitaries, Giridhar ji and ma'am. With your permission, I would like to say a few things. Being the speaker of the last speaker almost, I have great advantage that everything which was substantial has been already been explicated, expounded, but and I find myself trapped in a circle, you know. I don't know from where to start and where to end. But this is the benefit also of a circle, that you can choose any point as your beginning point and end anywhere. So it culminates. Okay? So let me begin with this assumption, or this is rather a reality, that UNESCO listed 46 ancient civilizations, you know. Out of these 46, 45 are no longer with us. They are gone. Only this civilization, our civilization, is still surviving and thriving. So there is something. And if we try to examine, if we try to retrospect on this, we will find this is a knowledge-centered civilization. And knowledge-centered civilization, and this land, as it is described in Vishnu Purana also, between Himalayas and the sea, this vast land, this has been considered, conceptualized as Chakravarti Kshetra. So India is never divided like South India, North India, East India, West India. This is very artificial, and maybe it got popularized during the British time. It was Pancha Dravid Kshetra, Pancha God Kshetra. That's the whole geography. And it's a civilization of Shastra and Sadhana. Shastra, where we can talk about, we can reflect upon various intellectual queries, quests. We can raise questions, we can raise doubts, and it will be taken care of in this intellectual tradition. But this is only the first part of this civilization. Second is sadhana, where you realize what you have learnt through the Shastras. And that's why right from the beginning, from the Upanishadic time, there is a classification as the question was put before this Rishi, Kasminno Bhagavo Vigyate Sarvamidam Vigyatam Bhavatiti. What is that knowledge, or what is that reality, knowing which everything else is known? This is the characteristics of this knowledge-centered civilization. See the quest. And such queries are available right from the Vedic texts. So the answer given to this question, or this rather kind of desire, jigyasa, is that the other Rishi here is not saying that I know everything, I am going to answer you. No, he says that as the Brahmavid had already stated, I am going to tell you. And what is that? Dve vidye veditavve. Do vidyaye hain. There are two knowledge disciplines, para and apara. Apara is all Shastra, including Paurusheya Shastra and Apaurusheya Shastra. Apaurusheya Shastra, you know, we have Vedas, and Paurusheya Shastra, that which is created by humans, let us say, where you can trace the history. Apaurusheya means non-contingent knowledge, not restricted to or not limited by person, place, time, or something like that. And Paurusheya is, of course, it's sensitive to time and space and many more other things. So this is Shastra, and that has to be realized through Paravidya. And that is the Paravidya. And there is no Shastra as such for this Paravidya. Okay? That is for the realization, for meditation also, sadhana. We have a very inherent vision that all Shastras are integral, interrelated with each other. And that's why our great acharyas are those who have re-established, let us say, or reinterpreted and made a kind of synthesis between the multiple thought streams. We can see in this context Acharya Abhinavagupta also. Okay? And there is an attempt, since it begins with jigyasa, our knowledge tradition, intellectual tradition begins with jigyasa. Jigyasa means that you have no presumptions, you have no prejudices. You have all such things are exhausted, and then we have a desire to know, jigyasa. So athato brahma jigyasa, athato dharma jigyasa, etc. All this is the beginning of the Shastras. Then it never ends with some kind of determinism that there is nothing beyond this. There is nothing beyond this. So ultimate statement is neti neti. That is achieved by applying all the methods, all the ways of language and logic. Only then we are able to say there is something beyond that. This is not the end. So this kind of kind of characteristics one can see within Shaiva philosophy also, where we have, there are 36 ontological principles. It's better to call tattva. Tattva has a very different meaning, not, cannot be captured by elements or so. Tattva, tattva, thatness, something, if we translate it, it will be like thatness. So 36 such tattvas, then there is 37th also, beyond this. And that's why Tantralok has 37 chapters also. Natya Shastra also has 37 chapters, 36 plus 1, let us say. So going beyond, whatever is mapped, that is fine. But there is a scope to go beyond. And this is the challenge before our acharyas. In the same way, I would like to put 8 rasas and then 9th rasas. And then Saptadashi Kala, Shodashi Kala, Abhinav Gupta in his Tantralok and his commentator Jayarath talks about Saptadashi Kala. Amakala is Saptadashi Kala. Now, in this intellectual space, there is nothing which is rejected. It is assimilated. So, you can see in its literary theory, you can see in philosophy, and in literary theory, for example, if you take Anandavardhan, you know, most of our aestheticians come from Kashmir. You can't help. You know? And there is something important, and that is the main theme of my talk, agamic assumptions of Abhinav Gupta's literary theory. So, where Anandavardhan talks about Dhvani, but he doesn't reject even Alankar or Riti or other things. Everything is assimilated within the fold of Dhvani. In the same way, Alankarics also do that. Rasa is also a kind of Alankara, like that. In philosophy, particularly in Trika philosophy, we have Kshemaraj who says in his Prativigya Hridayam, Tad Bhumika Sarva Darshan Isthiteha. That, and while explaining this, expounding this sutra in his Prativigya Hridayam, he takes note of all other philosophical systems. And there he is not rejecting anyone. He's simply stating that this Chiti Shakti, Chiti Bhagavati, is having multifold dimensions, or she is playing multiple roles in different philosophical systems. So, tad bhumika sarva darshan sthiteha. Sthitiya means siddhant. In all philosophical expositions, actually we find the exposition of this Bhagavati. Of course, various levels are there, and when he reaches this philosophy of Vyakarana, I deliberately avoid the term grammar. That doesn't fit into this context. Grammar literally means writing. It has nothing to do with analysis of language. This is the etymological meaning. So, Vyakarana. Vyakarana is also a darshan in our culture. I refer to Sarva Darshan Sangraha of Sri Madhvacharya, where 13th chapter of this great text is titled as Panini Darshanam. So, very late in the Western tradition, we realized that they realized that language has some of its philosophical elements as well. Philosophy of language is not more than 100 years kind of a discussion in the West, you know? And that was inspired when they came in contact with the Indian tradition. Okay. So, in Rasa Dhvani, you have all this Rasa and Dhvani assimilated, and that is supposed to be the soul of poetry, as we say. In this Dhvani theory, Anandavardhan also assimilates the theory of the grammarians, that is called Sphota, as its basis. So, nothing is lost. This is the beauty of this tradition, Parampara. Parampara has two important dimensions, as my teacher, Professor Kapil Kapoorji, says that this is continuity and cumulativeness. Without these, parampara cannot be formed. So you have the continuous tradition of thinking about various disciplines, like philosophy, like literature, like poetics, and many more other disciplines. Chaturdas Vidyasthanas are there. Now, if we come to this question of characteristics of Shaiva system, Shaiva philosophy, it can be easily be, explained that it is rooted in the agamic texts. Agam and Nigam are the sources of our culture. So it is rooted in Agam and Nigam. I don't want to go into this controversy whether Agam comes first or Nigam comes first, or what is the relationship, whether they are contradictory to each other, all not that important. There are sufficient references to prove that they are complementary, and so far the origin is concerned, nobody is sure about when the Agamas were composed or when the Nigamas are composed. But there is a kind of complementarity between the two. So it is particularly Trika system is rooted in Bhairavagama, that is the non-dualistic system. It is Pramatri Nishtha Darshana, Pramatri Nishtha, knower centered. That's why you won't find discussion on knower the way Kashmir Shaivism has dealt with. 7 levels, 7-fold forms of the knowers, beginning with Shiva Pramata to Sakal Pramata. And all these 7 types of knowers have their respective field of realization or knowledge of tattvas. Then the third aspect is its abhasvad. Abhas should not be taken in the way it is taken in Vedanta and in other philosophical systems. Abhas asamantat bhasiyati iti, that which is manifested, that which is already there. So it acquires a kind of ontological status. So nothing is untrue or nothing is false. Whatever appears to you or me, everything is true. That's why this philosophy is known as, refers to or prefers to call itself Chidananda, not Satchidananda. Sat is everywhere. There is nothing like Asat. We cannot say rabbit's horn don't exist. So it's a self-contradictory. Anyways, so it is there. So Satchidananda, maybe a kind of tautology. Sat is no longer required. Chidananda, just Chidananda, manifestation of the essence of the self. So Abhasavad, and then you have a unique explanation of language in this system. You see, here Varna or speech sounds, let us call it, not letter, speech sound. Speech sound. It is known as Matrika. These are the forms of energy, manifestation of energy. So it is called Matrika. And through these Matrikas, through these alphabets, the way we call it Varna Mala, Varno Ki Mala, garland of speech sounds. And that's why the depiction is that goddess wears this garland of Varnas, 50 Varnas in her neck. There are 2 types of arrangement. One is, of course, Matrika Kram, and another is Malini Kram. Malini Kram is Nadifanta, and Matrika Kram is Adikshanta, beginning with A, ending with Ksha, and another Malini begins with Na and ends with Fa. So Bhinna Kram is there. And unique thing is that, as it is explained by Acharya Abhinavguptapad himself in his Tantrasar and Tantralok, through these matrikas, through these varnas, the whole manifestation or whole creation can be explained. In fact, creation is analogous with this Matrika. So, for example, the first Maheshwar Sutra in Panini's Ashtadhyaya is Ayun, A-I-U. Okay? Abhinavagupta explains it so beautifully in the third Anik. A refers to Anuttara, Supreme Self, nothing beyond that, Anuttara. E refers to Ichha and U refers to Unmesh. So the world is Unmesh, manifestation of the desire of the ultimate self. Anuttar ki Ichha ka Unmesh, yah srishti. So this is how it goes on. Then you have knowledge, as we just talked about, this is a knowledge-centered civilization. And knowledge for what kind of knowledge we are seeking? There is a Shiva Sutra, interestingly, that says Jnanam Bandha. Okay? The second sutra in the Shiva Sutra, Jnanam Bandha. So knowledge obtained or acquired by the limited knowership. That is itself is limited, so it has no potential to liberate. Okay? But the first sutra is Chaitanyam Atma and then Jnanam Bandha. You can read the sutra together, Chaitanyam Atma, Jnanam Bandha. Then it becomes Ajnanam Bandha also. Okay? So in both ways it can be treated. Well, so what kind of knowledge? Knowledge, very categorically, Abhinavagupta says, Moksho, Ih Jnanam Moksha Karanam. Ih Jnanam Moksha Karanam. In his Tantrasar, knowledge is that which must ensure liberation. Bandha nimittasya ajnanasya virodhakatvad. Why? Because it is just contradictory or contrary to ajnan, that is the cause of bondage. Okay? That's why jnana has the single parameter that it must liberate. If it doesn't liberate, it is no longer ajnana, it is ajnana. And please take note of this also, that ajnana is not the absence of knowledge, it is limited knowledge, which we acquire with the limited knowership, as we just enumerated about the 7 types of knower. Except the Shiva Pramata, others have the limited knowership. Well, and this jnana is expounded in the Shastras. And what are the Shastras? Shastras are those which are manifested by none other than Shiva himself or herself, let us say. It's very difficult to talk about in terms of gender, you know, Shiva Shaktyatmakam. So it's very difficult. Anyways, that's the characteristics of language. So we have Shastras, Agam Shastras, 10 dualist, 18 dualist, cum non-dualist, Dvaita Advait, and 64 Advaita Bhairavagam Shastra. And then we have the very central notion of Anandavada. Ananda, that is the central philosophical characteristics of this system. And I can't help reciting Mahakavi Jayashankar Prasad in this regard. I don't know, when nobody was talking about Kashmir Shaiva Darshan, he composed his whole epic, Kamayani, based on this Prativigya Shastra. What a great scholarship and what a great visionary poet he was. And then he says this is the concluding line of Kamayani, Samarasthe Jadya Chetan, Sundar Sakar Banatha, Chetanata Ek Vilasti, Anand Akhanda Ghanatha. This is Chidananda Ghana, you know. So this is all blissfulness, all blissful, you know. This is the poet Jayashankar Prasad, who just has given you the essence of this Trika system. Now, if you go through this characteristics of Trika Shastra, I will just take up a few concepts. Since there is limited time, I won't be able to talk about all other things. But just pick up a few conceptual terms from the aesthetics and poetics of Acharya Abhinavagupta and see how his agamic sources helped him to come up with such a brilliant theory in poetics and aesthetics. You might have heard many definitions of poetry, right from Bhama to Pandit Raj Jagannath, and even modern poeticians in Sanskrit. They are also coming up with their own definition of poetry. And none of them is satisfactory. That's why they are defining again and again. It means the earlier definition was not sufficient. So this is a continuous process. Well, there is a definition which comes with the narrative of Kalidas and Vidyotama, where it is said that Vidyotama asked Kalidas, Asti kaschid vag vishesha? Is there anything, if you translate it like this, it will be, is there something which is very important, or what is the characteristic of your language? But I think, and this has been explained by my another guru, Acharya Janaki Vallabh Shastri ji, that this is perhaps the best definition of poetry. Asti kaschid vag vishesha. Not all statements in language can be regarded as poetry. So, not even some specific extraordinary statements can be regarded as poetry. Kaschid vag vishesha. Kaschid vag. Now, among these specific extraordinary statements, linguistic statements, a few of them, kaschid, koi, can be regarded as poetry. So you can understand how difficult this art form can be. Out of this 64 Chatushashti Kala, how difficult and how extraordinary this could be. And so this is because of this fluid nature of the discourse itself, discipline itself. And Abhinav Gupta very rightly in his commentary on Bharat's Natya Shastra says that this Natya Padarth is alaukik. Alaukik. It is alaukik, with dash, then laukik, not divine. Not divine, exactly. Alaukik. So he enumerates first 10 laukic experiences, worldly experiences, and their corresponding knowledge forms. So 10 types of worldly experiences and 5 types of their respective cognitions in 2 places in Abhinav Bharati, in the first chapter and then in the 6th chapter, that is called Rasadhyaya. There is no time to go through all these types, you may refer to. And then he says that Kavya or Natya or literary experience is unique, that cannot be assimilated in this list of 10 types of experiences or 5 types of cognitions. That's why, and this is not imaginary, this is not non-existential. So a theoretician has to create a space for this experience as well. So the other node is alaukik. And there he say, there it has been already stated by Professor Bharat Gupta ji, that it is Brahmananda Sahodara, as Vishwanath, Kaviraj Vishwanath in his Sahitya Darpan also records. Why Sahodara? That because these two, Brahmananda and Rasanubhuti, belong to the same category. They share the same category, and that is alaukik. Brahmananda, the experience of the ultimate self, also cannot be enumerated under these 10 types and 5 types of the categories. So, Brahmananda Sahodara, that doesn't mean that both are same. Since they share the same category, that doesn't mean they are synonymous. So, Sahodara, that's why Sahodara. And you see, the difficulty is that this category is also termed as anirvachaniya, inexplicable. So you can't say really, you can experience, but you cannot explain it. And that's why ras is not described. It will be the most boring thing to describe a ras. Ras is manifested, suggested. व्यंजना होती है, रस की व्यंजना होती है, रस व्यंजित होता है, न कि उसका वर्णन होता है विधा में और लक्षणा में. So this is the important dimension of this. Why? And then comes the concept of apurva, which Abhinav Gupta begins with his this term. He begins his Dhanyalok Lochan. Apurvam yad vastu prathayati vina karana kalam. Yesterday it was explained very well by Professor Alwarji, so I need not repeat the same stuff. But Apurva itself creates or suggests the extraordinariness of literary discourse. And the whole Western question regarding whether literature is discourse of knowledge or not is just out of place in our context. How can you raise doubt where your first two poets were rishis, Valmiki and Vyas? They were seers. They were not just like makers as we see poet. So this is the richness of this literary tradition. So Apurvam, so poet is not supposed to, or he is not compelled to copy things from elsewhere. Apurva, he is creating something extraordinary. Of course, he is not going in contradiction to whatever is already established. And that's why our poeticians are very careful. When they talk about the flaws in poetry, they take note of this thing. I just cite two examples from Bhamaha, Kavya Alankar. He says that Agam Virodhi and Lok Virodhi, both are the doshas, flaws in poetry, where you violate the norms as it is already established in the Shastras, and Shastra is not any other ordinary book, okay? So it has a very rigorous methodology. So whatever is established in the Shastra, if you are saying something in contradiction to that, that will be Agam Virodhi. And again, when you are also not following the norms or the customs and traditions available with the world, that will also be a flaw in the poetry. So Lok and Shastra go together. There is nothing like that Shastra is more preferred and Lok is less. This is not our culture. So Lok Virodhi and Shastra Virodhi both are the flaws. And that's why here the requirement is that one has to be endowed with extraordinary power to create art form, you know. And that's why we have among the Kavya Hetus, causes of poetry, we have Pratibha. And Pratibha is a very central term in our agamas and also in poetics. Abhinav Gupta's own guru in his Kavya Shastra, Bhattataut, he had defined Pratibha Navnamormesha Shalinim Matam. That which has new kind of manifestations all the time, new, extraordinary, but that is not sufficient. That also happens to a yogi, but a yogi is not able to create an artwork, okay? And that's why Abhinav Gupta defines in Dhanyalok Lochan Pratibha as Apurva Vastu Nirmana Kshama Pragya. Apurva Vastu, that is capable of creating something which is very extraordinary. That is the ability of the poet to create, not just having that spurana, but also to be able to recreate it or create it. And that's why a literary discourse, meaning in a literary discourse is nothing other than the experience that is called rasa, tat kavyartho rasa, as Abhinav Gupta puts it. And that's why the receiver of this discourse is said, Adhikari Chatra Vimala Pratibhanashali Hridaya. Viman Pratibhanashali Hridaya. Hridaya is again a very technical term, and that's why we have a concept in poetics, Sa Hridaya. This Hridaya is synonymous with Pratibha, Vimarsha, Shiva, Para, and rest of other things. You know, such a highly technical terms. Sahridaya means, usually it is translated as Saman Hridaya. It is not. It is, Hridaya is this, this Chiti, Bhagavati herself, you know. So it goes very close to Pratibha. And Pratibha, Abhinavgupta defines in Malini, in his Malini Vijay Vartika, and elsewhere also Paratrimshika Vivrana, that in two ways, Prati plus Bha, Pratibha. Bha means light. That means refers to consciousness or Chit Shakti. It is the ability ability to illuminate, And second aspect, second dimension of this Pratibha is that it is aware of that it is illuminating. It is aware of that something is illuminating. So in this sense, it comes very close to the notion of or the concept of Vimarsha. Pratibha is very close to Vimarsha. And that's why Abhinavgupta in his Lochan, when he talks about in the end of each Udyota, each chapter of Dhanyalok Lochan, it has 4 chapters, he invokes 4 levels of Vani, Vak, Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama and Vaikhari. In the first Udyot, where he refers to Para, he is using the word Pratibha. Instead of Para, he is using Pratibha. Yadunmilan Shaktiyaiva Vishwam Unmilayati Kshanat Swatmayatan Vishrantam Tam Vande Pratibham Shivam. So this Pratibha is none other than the Shakti of Shiva, which can manifest the reality or world within a moment, without any effort. Okay? And accordingly, in all these following 3 Udyotas, he again prays to Pashyanti, then Madhyama, and then Vaikhari. And in this way, Lochan gets completed. I would like to draw to your attention towards Abhinav Bharati as well. And in Abhinav Bharati, Acharya Abhinavgupta has taken a different way to refer to 36 or 37 elements of ontological elements of Kashmir Shaivism. So he begins with Dhara. Dhara means earth. That is the last manifestation of Shiva, and then ends with Shiva. So Natya is also a way to go beyond whatever is visible. Art, in fact, makes us it makes us available to whatever is beyond our senses. Murtan vyapar hai. Kala mein bhav takes the form. The wonderful dance and other cultural events we had witnessed in last 2 days is very, very important. So from Dhara to Shiva. So in the beginning of each chapter of the Natya Shastra, he invokes each single form of Bhagavan Shiva. So 36th, 37th elements are discussed there. Now, his aesthetics and poetics is based on Purnata, the notion of Purnata, Swatantra and Purnata. Swatantra is that Supreme Self, Parabhairav, can manifest anything with his or her sheer desire, you know. So in Malini Vijayavartik, again, he says that Shasanam Shasitavyam cha Shasaka Cheti Yatkila Tat Tatra Kala Kalitam Swatantra Dvaita Sundaram. So this is Swatantra Dvaita. That is Sundar. That makes something beautiful. That is makes something extraordinary. Without this Swatantriya, poet or an artist can't create anything, you know, and the object has to be extraordinary. So this is very, very important aspect of his poetics. And then Nirmalya, Nirmalata. There are 3 malas, 3 kinds of impurities discussed in Triksh system, Anava, Maya and Karma. So a poet, these mala makes us a limited being, you know. They are forms of ajnana. That's why they makes us limited knowership. Poetry or art which is produced with this malas may not be appealing to each and everyone, okay, may not be. And in this context, we can see the contemporary literary writings, maybe that will be a critique to that, critique to that. So one's chit has to be free from all these three malas. Anav, Mayi and Karma. So no much time to explain these things. And then the ability, this is the definition, the only definition we find in the whole poetics, Indian poetics, Sanskrit poetics is, of Sahridaya is this. Yesham kavyanushilana abhyas vasat vishadi bhute manomukre varnaniye tanmayi bhavan yogyata tes hridaya samvad bhaja sahridaya. In Lochan, Dhanya Lok Lochan, Abhinav Gupta gives this definition. Earlier also, sir had referred to Sadharanikaran. Abhinav Gupta accepting that notion, but he's using another more subtle term, and that is Tanmayi Bhavan. Tat May Bhavan. Yogyata. What should I say? The viewer or the adhikari of Sahitya should have this ability to become one with whatever is being depicted or portrayed in art. And that is possible only when his or her chitta is nirmala. Otherwise, this is not possible, you know. So, Sahridaya, and then Samarasya, Samarasta. Samarasta ek vilasti ananda akhanda ghanatha. This is a philosophy of Samarasta, not ek rasta. Ek rasta, ni rasta ko bhi kehte hain. Okay? So, not ek ras, Samaras. So, in all these 36 tattvas, that Supreme Self is permeated, it's pervasive, you know, Samaras. And then that's why Acharya say we accept both Vishwotirana Dasha as well as Vishwamaya Dasha. Vishwamaya and Vishwotiranata both are acceptable in our system. And then you have the notion of Chidanand as we talked about. In Shiva Sutra, this has been explained in 3 places, and that is Chaitanyam Atma, Atma is Chaitanya, Chittam Atma, Chitta is the limited self, limited knowledge, or limited, let us say, consciousness. Chittam, Chitta and Chitta are technical terms. So Chitta refers to individual consciousness, and then Nartak Atma in Shiva Sutra. Nartak, where the performer, for a time being, you know, veils his identity and then accept the new one. So Nartak Atma, and accordingly, it is the self that is Atman in all these 3 roles, where it is Chaitanyam Atma, Chittam Atma, or Nartak Atma. And see, they have not changed the word Atma in these 3 sutras, just for recognition, that there is a scope for recognition, that one would be able to realize his or her true self. So it is Atman that is performing multiple roles in these ways. And the third section of Shiva Sutra says, Nartak Atma Nartakaha, Rango Antaratma Prekshakani Indriyani. So beautiful stage is set here, that Atma is dancer, Nartak, Nartak in the technical sense. The inner self is Antaratma, is Ranga Manch, like this. And Prekshakani Indriyani, our knowing senses are the spectators. So all this Nati is going within also, which is manifested outside. And this is precisely the role of 4 levels of speech: Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, and Vaikhari. Para is a very, very important term in Agam Shastra and also in Indian philosophy, as we refer to Paravidya. So Paravidya, Para Bhakti, Para Shakti, and this Para Vani, Para Vak. So that is there, and Para Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. This is how the inner self manifests itself. And this is the Avaroha Kram. By accepting the Aroha Kram, beginning with Vaikhari, then Madhyama, then Pashyanti, then Para, we come back to our own true self. We can realize our true self. That's why individual is called Vyakti. Vyakti through which something is manifested. Vyakta. ये अर्थ है etymology इसकी. So something is through which something this inner self or this chitta manifests itself. So this is how it goes on. And well, there are so many things. I don't know how much time conclude. Okay, so I'll just end with a note that for last 2 days, earlier we were hearing about discovery. The term discovery was very, very frequent during the colonial period. And our scholars were so, engrossed with this great discovery. They never failed to use this. So discovery of Sanskrit, as it was said that William Jones discovered Sanskrit. They discovered many lands, many land routes, sea routes. Discovery was very much in the air of 18th, 19th century. And that's why we have a great book, Discovery of India also. Okay. Then you see, but I got surprised that we started talking about rediscovery. So are we going back in the same fold? No, it may be dangerous. It may be dangerous. Okay. Kashmir Shaivism, Trik Darshan, gives us a better and the most appropriate word, that is Pratyabhigya. Recognition should be our key for further exploration, and when we want to achieve that level of Ek Bharat, Shrishta Bharat, that should be our key, to recognize our own self. Abhinavgupta Padacharya describes Pratyabhigya that it is nothing other than the recognizing one's own self in Ishwara Pratyabhigya Vimarshini. In the very first chapter, he describes this. So this is, Kashmir also needs Pratyabhigya, and so needs this whole land. Thank you very much.
What an outpour of agamic concepts, Professor Rajneesh Mishra. Thank you so much. The more and more you delved into those concepts, the more we realized what a polymath Abhinavagupta was. In so many areas, philosopher, mystic, aesthetician, poet, dramatist, theologian, and logician, staggering abundance of knowledge. We are a knowledge-centered civilization, as he rightly put, and it's a civilization of Shastra and Sadhana, and it's our responsibility to carry this parampara forward, and I'm sure with scholars like these, we are bound to take this parampara forward. Thank you so much, Professor Rajneesh Mishra. A big round of applause to all our speakers for session 1. On that note, we shall break for lunch, and we shall assemble at 2 p.m. Sharp, because we're running out of time. I know there's very less time to have lunch, just 45 minutes or so, but I'd request you all to please assemble back in the auditorium at 2 p.m. so that we can resume session 2. Thank you so much.